the trip. I gather, though, that it won't be him in the car this afternoon. If they get the car out, it will be George Russell, but we'll all be excited to see his first foray out onto an F1 track. But that's all from me for now, but we'll come back down here, please do, in about 10 minutes' time.
Well,
red flag session.
Dial us up, Nat, when you see those barricades being moved. Yeah, so the red flag is out. The Haas has ground to a halt, as we saw very quickly. Poor old Romain Grosjean, he'd only just got in the thing.
Yeah, that's those teething problems I was talking about. Yes.
Actually, they've had a few issues because actually the Haas rolled to a halt this morning as well. So clearly a bit of reliability going on there. But before we move on from Williams, deep-rooted problems back at base. Does this whole delay point to that? Let's move on and talk about other stuff after this point. Paddy Lowe, is he the man? Claire wasn't apportioning blame.
He's under pressure, isn't he? Under pressure.
I can't get away from the fact that when he joined that team, Williams had the 4th fastest car in Formula 1.
Sure, yes.
And now it might be coincidence.
And coming from where he was coming from, with the knowledge that you would expect him
I don't know what we're meant to read into that.
No, I don't know what. No, it's not. And it's one of those.
Doesn't look good on paper, does it?
It looks very poor on paper. But you would hope with the experience he's had, at McLaren, for example, at the same time, all that sort of is a situation you can sort of go back to that and you would think sort of move it forward. But, with the issue that they've got in getting the car, which is your original question, I don't think that really matters too much. Preparation is one thing, getting the thing built up and ready to go to a test is another. It's down to just sheer performance. It really doesn't matter if they missed this test and they ended up coming to the second test. The car has just got to be competitive. They've got to get themselves back into that top 4 situation and hopefully sort of higher up like they used to be, and we miss them being there. So there's a lot of work that's got to make the car itself produce the goods when it's actually on the track. I'm not really bothered about it being delayed. It's just got to make work for the drivers, for the team, and when that stopwatch stops.
Well, look, let's have a look at the times so far. So far this week, actually, for those of you who are joining us for the first time. So we had Ferrari have been utterly dominant this week. Sebastian Vettel, fastest on day one by 0.4 of a second, knocked up a phenomenal 169 laps. New teammate Charles Leclerc got in the car yesterday. Ditto. Set a time almost identical, just 1/10 slower. Yeah. 157 laps from him. And then until about 10 minutes before lunch, we had Vettel fastest this morning as well. But then Kimi Räikkönen put the fastest time in fastest time of the week so far, a 17.7. Yeah. Now, Johnny, you have just arrived. What do you make of it? Ferrari are going to win the Winter World Championship by the looks of things. They were always good at that back in the day.
Always, yes.
Look, who's impressed you so far?
Well, I think they have, out of the box. And it was one of those situations, I've always said that normally when a car rolls its wheels for the very first time, almost within the first sort of lap, a driver can feel if it's going to be an excellently mega fast car or it's just going to be sort of an average car. You can feel that more or less straight away. And that seemed to be what that Ferrari seems to have got. And when I've been watching it, I was on the train yesterday coming back from London, and the car looks, as it has done actually for the last couple of years, beautiful. The balance that it's got is always there, which is what we've seen before. But the speed and the way, especially when Charles got in the car as well, again, proved that exact point. He got in it, comfortable, bang, did the time. Johnny. So they look pretty amazing at the present time. But I think there's a long way to go, probably with the fuel loads that I'm sure the sort of Mercedes and probably Red Bull are running as well. So,
Johnny, it's so nice to be speaking to a guy who's been out there and properly done it, because all the drivers are saying, "Oh, it's too early to tell. Too early to tell whether the car's any good." But you think within a couple of laps you've got a pretty good
As a driver, I think you have a pretty good idea when that car is going to be sort of give you a bit of a wow factor, a bit of a tingle down the back of your neck. So, yeah.
So when Bottas jumps out of the Mercedes on day one and goes, "Yeah, I quite enjoyed that."
Yeah.
I was reading a bit into that thing. Quite enjoyed.
Yeah, but that's not comfortable, is it?
Yeah. So I think all the indications are. I mean, just look at our timing screen in front of us in the comms box here. We've got Bottas was the slowest of everybody this morning. Of course, they've got fuel in it, and they're not going to be the slowest when we turn up in Melbourne. But I think we've seen enough 2.5 days in to think that Mercedes have got a bit of work to do. Certainly that.
Yeah, I think they're just the comfort factor from what I see at Ferrari. It just seems to be whatever the conditions are. You know, Barcelona, I know that the surface has changed since I was racing here, but you still have the cooler morning, you have the slightly warmer sort of midday, and then you have that cooler evening, and that's always when those times are sort of banged in. But it always seems to work in all those conditions. These are not sort of, mega changing conditions, but there is a slight change during the day, and the car seems to adapt to that. Now that historically has always been a very, very good thing, because that generally means, especially here in Barcelona as well, that if a car works here, there's a very, very good chance it will pretty much work everywhere else as well. So I think that's, again, for me, is another sign of positivity for Ferrari going to Australia.
What do you think of the colour?
I think it's quite good, isn't it? It's good. It's different for a change. Not that sort of polished.
I said yesterday
red.
I thought Enzo Ferrari would be turning.
He
his
probably
grade.
is. I think he's turned a few times, I would imagine. Yes,
Yeah,
I think it wouldn't be. But I think it's that modern twist, in the modern world that we live in, and it is something different. Plus, it's lighter.
Yeah,
and that makes a big difference. And that's where, again, Red Bull were very smart very early on to know that we can gain some time, whatever that time may be, by just having this slightly lighter paintwork. It's a bit duller. The matte colour that we got, but actually it looks quite good. So it works in both ways.
There's an air of positivity coming out of that Ferrari garage at the minute. I sense the changes they've made over the winter.
Sebastian has mentioned, doesn't he?
Yeah, have made Sebastian much happier camper.
Yep.
It would appear this year. Clearly, he thinks he's got a good car underneath him, but seems like he's in a better place. And wind the clock back to middle of last year, Hockenheim. He's just crashed out of the lead of his home Grand Prix. Arch rival has come from goodness knows how far back to win the Grand Prix. The balance of the championship is this massive pendulum swing in the opposite direction. Vettel then got lost, I would put it to you, and he had no one. He didn't have a manager with him to help keep him on the straight and narrow.
I think
that's where it.
Yeah.
So, if he'd had a manager, someone, just a bit of advice, shoulder to cry on. Do you think that would have made a difference, or do you think there were more fundamental problems at Ferrari last year? Yeah,
there's an element of a driver needs to be happy in a team, and the ones I always look at as drivers from the guys I raced against was Michael. Michael was very good at getting those people like Ross and Rory, for example, in his early days of Benetton, to get on board and have utter belief in what Michael was doing. They thought he was the absolute best, but he got those guys on his side. The guy that did it completely the opposite way around was Mika Häkkinen when he went to McLaren with Ron Dennis. Ron Dennis gave Mika what he needed to win those world championships. So they were complete opposites, but they were both comfortable in those different teams and the way that they worked in different ways. But you can see the way that Michael did it. That's why he achieved what he achieved down the line. So Sebastian got lost, but I think they got lost together during last season. He made those errors. That's something that Lewis didn't do. And that does make a big difference, especially to mentally, because Lewis knows that there's a weakness and he'll sort of take that energy from that weakness. And of course, Sebastian knows he's made those errors, Germany being the prime example. It's great now because he says about the change, the feels really positive and everything else. The car looks good. But he had a comfort with his teammate, with Kimi. He never felt he was a threat, which is something that is always a big positive thing for a driver to have. Now, is that going to sort of slightly throw a spanner in the works with his comfort, with the positive changes, with a possibly sort of a championship-winning car again? And now he's got Charles Leclerc, who's going to sort of get involved at the same time. But that is part and parcel of being a racing driver and having to deal with those different elements that get thrown in. And can he do it? Personally, I think he can, as long as the whole team works together to make the final result come, which hasn't happened in the last couple of years, has it? Where they've just lacked a little bit, where Mercedes just seem to be on top of everything that is going on. And Lewis is the prime example. They've given probably what Red Bull did to Adrian Newey, for example. They gave him that freedom because he always felt suffocated when he was at McLaren. They've given Lewis that freedom, and that freedom has produced, for me, the ultimate Lewis Hamilton at the moment. This is the best I've ever seen him. You know, this is to me is almost a peak. So I think it's as good as it gets.
Well, and how long can a driver stay at his peak?
That's all down to motivation, isn't it? And desire to want to achieve race wins and championships. You know, drivers are always, especially Lewis says he's not sort of interested in numbers and stats and championships. But you are, because that's why you do it. You're here to win those races, but of course ultimately it's to win the championship as well. So motivation was something we're at in centre. Always spoke about motivation, and I don't think that changes. I think Michael, when you look at what he had at Ferrari, it was the motivation of all those ingredients firing him as quickly as he did down the racetrack. So he can go on for as many years as he feels happy in the situation. Nigel Mansell won a championship at 40, so there's plenty of time for that to happen.
But I wonder how quick his motivation will ebb away if this year's W10 isn't quite as good, and if he's not winning as many races, and suddenly those 91 wins of Schumacher and the 7 championships look a little bit further away, a little bit more out of touch.
Yeah, but I don't think he can complain too much with the last 6 or 7 years. Because they haven't been bad.
No, they haven't been bad.
They haven't been bad.
Yeah. So that is Sebastian Vettel. So you think we're going to see Sebastian back to his best? Let's actually. I'm just looking at the timing screens now. As on our screens there, you can see the Haas coming back into the garage. A real blow for them actually, because Fittipaldi only managed. What did he do? He did 48 laps this morning, and Grosjean has just done 8 now. So they're not getting the mileage under their belts that they would have hoped. But, Johnny, here's a question. So, Vettel did 169 laps on Monday. Do you get to a point where you can't learn anymore? Why do you do 169? That's 2.5 Grand Prix distances. You know, you have a run program that you decide the night before with your engineers. Do you need to do 169 laps in a Grand Prix car on a given day?
Well, the team feels that they need that information, and I think that's why those laps are now done. It's all down to having the car as reliable as it possibly can be, so it's ready out of the box when we get to Australia. So the driver is the only one who's able to sort of do that. It's a lot of laps, though. I have to say, it's one hell of a lot.
It is a hell of a lot of laps. Well, look, you talk about drivers. We've been talking about drivers. Let's hear what Lewis Hamilton has to say.
Like the feel of the new car, Lewis, and I suppose the wider questions, do you think it will provide for better racing? That was the intention with some of these rule changes.
Mate, I can hear you now. I haven't heard you for ages.
I mean, I have no idea. I
Got you now.
That was the reason for the rule change. I'm not sure that is particularly the case, but I've been behind one car, I think, out there, and it seemed fine. It didn't seem any different to last year in that respect. But I'm hopeful that it will be better for racing, for more close combat racing. But yeah, time will tell. Again, I've not really been out behind too many cars. So
I wanted to ask you about. I know Sebastian Vettel, your big rival, has got a young teammate coming in who maybe won't be the priority, even if he isn't sort of a defined number 2. But Valtteri must be really fired up this year to put together a proper title bid. How much of an extra challenge might you face for him?
For Valtteri?
Yeah.
I'm excited for Valtteri. I think it takes time to really dig your roots into a new team. It's not an easy process, and he's been an invaluable part of the last couple of years, and the growth has been, I think, has been amazing, and he's really helped keep us stabilized in terms of like positive energy within the team. So he'll continue on that form, but I'm sure he'll be, naturally reflects after each season. He will want to be stronger this year, and as a team collectively, we'll support him in every way we can. And me and him have a very, very good working relationship. So we actually do talk about things with the car. We work together, which I don't know if I've ever experienced that in the past. We actually really do work together. We talk to each other about things. That will continue, and we're hoping that we have a strong team and a strong year together.
there, but the pictures you're looking at now, that is the Williams garage. And Natalie Pinkham, are you down there?
I am. Yeah, huge moment for George Russell because he is out in the F1 car for the very first time, and I've just been told by the team that he'll do one install lap and then come back into the garage and they'll work on the car and check everything out for another 45 minutes or so, and then hope to really clock up the laps this afternoon. But yeah, a big moment for both him and the team. They are finally out.
Now, Natalie, I've got a question for you.
Please do.
Can you ask someone in the team if there was one particular aspect of the car that was delaying it? Was there an issue with... where was the issue? Why was it delayed?
Right, TC, I'm going to go and ask them that very question right now. I did try to get an answer from Paddy Lowe a little earlier, and Paddy, who you know is just one of the nicest guys in the paddock, absolutely had his head down and said he couldn't even spare 2 minutes. So I will go and ask him again at the end of the day, but I'll go and ask someone else now and see if I can get your answer.
Good on you. Thanks, Nat. Thanks, Nat. Well, look at that car. It's the first time we've seen it. First of all, do you like Williams in light blue, Johnny?
Yeah, I like it.
It's distinctive.
Very distinctive. Yeah, I think it worked. It's great to see George out there, though, isn't it, as well? Brilliant to see another Brit having a go in a historic British team like that, with its that rocket sort of splattered all over the side of it. So, yeah, it's great to see the car do a whole lap without sort of chucking to a halt on that installations lap. So that's a positive thing, let's say, to the start of their testing.
Yeah, and it's completed a lap. Imagine if it
comes
out halfway round.
Yeah,
that would not have been good.
No, that would have been not good.
Because, of course, we ought to say that they were meant to be doing a filming day. Each team is allowed to do a handful of laps on the pretense that it's a filming day. A lot of them use it as a shakedown before coming to Barcelona. Williams were meant to be doing that on Saturday, so they didn't even get that opportunity. That is the very first lap of the Williams. Yeah,
it's the first time I've seen it. You can see the barge balls there at the side of the new sort of smaller, further forward shifted barge balls. Very different, very sort of plain. I only saw the Force India, and there's a lot more detail on the side of that Force India. So again, a slightly different philosophy. As we see Lewis bounce off the track, going into the final chicane.
He's done a bit of that. He's done a bit of that this week, finding the limits. But I mean, so the bottom two drivers so far today, JH.
No, the car is so bad.
Oh my goodness!
It's all gone
when
wrong.
They win their 6th consecutive double, I'd quite like to take a photograph of that and show it to Toto Wolff, the team boss. But look, we've talked about Ferrari. Let's talk about the man who's at the top of the timesheets at the moment, Kimi Räikkönen. You spent a lot of time at Sauber in your career. Now, it's changed since then. Primarily because of the wind tunnel that actually Kimi bought them, because McLaren had to pay to get him out of his contract for 2002. Sure. So it's kind of Kimi's wind tunnel. He's now getting the benefit of it. But anyway, we're looking at the man on screen now. First of all, what can this team do this year?
Well,
a bit more money coming from Alfa Romeo.
Yep.
Close affinity with Ferrari.
Yeah.
Can they score podium?
I think there is an outside chance of that happening. I think you've still got the big three. I would be surprised if they will be able to sort of pierce that bubble and get themselves sort of amongst the top three, as I said. But I think the speed that they were able to find last year was pretty impressive, to be honest, compared to where they were at the beginning of the season. They were absolutely nowhere, and it really started to come together exactly when that sort of relationship started to blossom in a positive way. So that seems to be something I'm sure is going to carry on. It looks straight away very competitive as well. And you've got Kimi that, getting that race win in Austin, I think for a driver is a very powerful, positive thing that you can carry through. His character, and I know him a little bit out of the cockpit, away from the Grand Prix circuit, and
he's
absolute fruitcake, and it's
dangerous,
but it's dangerously brilliant. Yes. And it's just wonderful to see. He lets his hair down, and he just has a lot of fun. But that's what happens in that cockpit. That's where all that comes out, which sadly we don't see enough of. We see him when we do the lawnmower racing, then it comes out. It's really funny when he's in a situation where he knows it's just about fun. Then he will come out and be a completely smiley Kimi Räikkönen. Because after we did, I think this year with the hovercraft, what do you want to do next time? And he he wanted to do motocross. But that's him, and he would do it, and he's a rarity on that one. I'm not very good at motocross.
His son, aged 4, Robin, is already doing motocross.
Right, okay.
And
He's
he's
do a
asked
head-to-head
Daddy
with
for
them then.
He's asked Daddy for a go-kart. He told me this yesterday. Can I tell you a quick story about Kimi Räikkönen?
Do.
I was with him yesterday, and he was telling me about the 2013. I'm quoting him when I say, that was the year I went off the rails. Bahrain Grand Prix finishes second. Has a few drinks back at the hotel. This is all he was telling me on the record, so I'm not saying anything that he didn't want out there. And he went on a 16-day drinking binge.
Yep.
Stopped drinking in the early hours of the Thursday morning prior to the Spanish Grand Prix next weekend, next race. Finished second. And he's utterly convinced that living a life like that has not affected his driving one iota. Discuss. Did you live like that, Johnny?
No.
but
it did work. I heard a Spa when he was at Ferrari, and he had the same thing. They were trying to stop him. He took stuff out of the minibar in his hotel room and everything else, and they found him in the morning in a bit of a state, but he went out and won the race. It is weird how, for him, that works. For other people, of course, that doesn't work because of concentration issues that sort of come with it sometimes. But for him, it seems to heighten his sensitivity.
Almost, is it a reset button? In the way that Lewis has to dash around the world, seeing A-list celebrities, meeting up with people and having his photograph taken, that's his reset, and maybe Kimi's is just having a bunch of fun with his mates.
Yeah, I think the bunch of fun with his mates is a very important part of the world that Kimi comes from, and we know, he turns up, everybody sees it, that he's not very wanting to be in front of the camera, but as soon as that helmet goes on, the visor goes down, those lights go out, you've got this incredible talent that is still there, even in these latter years that he's at the moment, still in those, was he 37, is he?
No, he turns 40 this
40.
year.
It's 40.
He turns 40. I'm trying to convince him life begin before he didn't really believe.
Well, there you go, the Nigel Mansell effect.
Yeah, exactly. He's got another world championship in him, isn't he?
But that was the question you asked a bit earlier on about motivation with Lewis. It's motivation that keeps Kimi wanting to go around. Sometimes I look at it, I go, why do you want to just hang on? Why don't you achieve what you achieved? You had that lovely win in Austin last year, and then sort of say, right, I'm done.
The timing would have been good, wouldn't it?
But it's a very hard thing sometimes for a driver to say. When is the right time to stop?
Except one thing. Looking at it from his perspective, I assume he's earning a very good salary again.
Yeah.
And it's a bit different this time because he lives half an hour up the road from Hinville.
Yeah.
So he can drive there and back, whereas back in the day, whether it was McLaren or Ferrari, it was always having to get on a plane. Now we can it's almost like a 9-to-5 job for him now, isn't it, going to the factory? So I think it's a little easier. And I sensed he felt a bit more liberated being in a smaller team, less pressure. He's going to enjoy these last couple of years, I think.
Yeah, I think he is. Bert Zender, he's still there, and I know he's very, very friendly with Bert. So even that relationship within the team is going to be very positive for Alfa Romeo itself, but of course for Kimi at the same time. And you're right, I think it is a lot to do with the comfort factor with Kimi. You probably don't get a comfort factor when you're racing at somewhere like Ferrari, but I think at the end of the day, it's a good position for him to be in these latter years, and that 40 sort of coming up, as you said.
Well, let's take a look at the car on the screen now. Daniel Ricciardo getting his first bit of mileage. Start by talking about this racetrack. You said at the top of the hour, this is a brilliant track for testing a car that is good here. Just talk us around this track.
Yeah, that turn 4, which is actually the corner before he's just gone round there. Such a long one and very, very difficult. And then you've got this sort of left and right flick, not much to it. This brilliant sort of flat-out right-hander at the top of the hill where it used to be a sort of bit of a lift, but it's changed over the years. Then this long straight, back straight, into this final sector. A little bit sort of like a go-kart track. But this left-hander really does show if the car has a very good back end. And you can see there's no sort of moving around. And that seems to be quite settled. And it has shown to be a very, very well planted rear end on this Renault. And it's changed the direction through that final chicane. A little bit slower than I've seen, I think, from the likes of the Ferrari. But that sort of last flat-out right-hander taken very, very easily. But, of course, it's this long straight where they're about 320-odd kilometres down towards that turn 1. So braking stability is very, very important. Change your direction, a little bit downhill, turn in right. Then you've got to flick it left, and that change of direction. You've really got to keep you probably in the middle of the road to turn right through this turn 3, long right-hander. And again, this was always my favourite turn 4, because the turning is very important to stability. But it's so long on the exit, and you're trying to get on the power, and you have to use as much as the road as you can see being used there. And then that final downhill left-hander where we started the lap earlier on.
There,
Great
ladies
track.
and gentlemen, is a lap with Johnny Herbert. You might have noticed on the straights that the DRS on the Renault is not working because Ricciardo had while you were at home on the train and coming back from London, whatever you were doing yesterday,
Yes,
Johnny.
I missed that,
Ricciardo had his DRS broke. Top flap of the rear wing came off halfway down.
Yeah, it seemed to be the DRS
and
link.
so very lucky not to hit the barrier.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think
Which I have done.
a precaution at the end here.
No, it was actually where the board is there, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I went turn left when Stewart and the wing collapsed, and it was the main plane if I remember correctly, and it turned sharp left, and I think the impact on the wall on the left was 180 or something or other, and it was just in front of Damon Hill actually, and as I slid backwards down towards turn 1, the back was starting to lift and fly, and it just caught the wall, which then brought it back down again. If it hadn't caught the wall,
I don't think you would
think
have landed
the thing
yet.
will have just exactly.
Now, the folks at home can't see what we're pointing at. So our comms
it's
box
about halfway
is at
down.
the top end of the
Pit
pit
exit.
lane.
Pit
And
exit.
at the pit exit
That's
is where
where
you
it
had.
happens. Yeah. 180.
That's a big shunt, isn't it?
It's not. It was a nice soft one because it didn't actually do sort
'Cause
of
it was
much, but the actual initial
Could have been
impact
worse.
was pretty high. So again, that's back in '99. So this is where these wings are always tested to the absolute max. Again, that seems to be sort of more related to the DRS that we saw with the Renault. Didn't have it back then. As you know.
Johnny, there's so much I could talk to you about. Will we talk about 1999?
Okay.
We want to talk about testing 2016.
Sure.
What are we? 2016, 2019. But I want to talk Malaysia 99, that wonderful race he drove. But anyway,
Yes.
let's look at what we've got on track. I think we're following the matte red Ferrari SF90. Named up, the team is 90 years old this year. What are you pointing out, Johnny?
Well, you remember this happened the other day with Lewis behind Kvyat, and it seems to be the same thing. I think Lewis was doing, which may be the same thing with Vettel. We'll have to wait and see if he tries to pass it. I wonder if he's trying to find out what happens following another car,
Very good point.
because this is something that these guys haven't really experienced yet. And I think it looks to me that's exactly what he's doing at the moment.
Something
And
you
I
might-
think you would do that because you would want to know when you get to Australia within a pack, what does the car do? How does it react? You know what it's done before, and we can't get very close. So this is maybe something they're just trying to work out. I think that's exactly what Lewis was doing, and I reckon this could be exactly the same thing.
How very interesting. Something you do while you're doing 169 laps.
Yes,
A reason
exactly
to keep
as
going
well.
round and round and round.
Keep on learning.
It's an interesting thing. So they've come up with, it's wider front wings, bigger, deeper, higher rear wings as well to try and allow the cars. What you're seeing here, Kvyat in front. No, Vettel slowed down to give himself a bit of distance. So what I'm trying to think like he's thinking. He's thought, I've learnt enough.
Yeah.
Now I want clean air to carry on with my program because it's destroying the front tyres or whatever. But John, here's the thing. So we've come up with all these new regulations to improve overtaking. Yet, in following the Renault, the one thing I'm about to point out we're not going to see, but you've got this gaping hole now when the DRS opens. It's the aperture is 2 centimetres bigger than it was last year. So I think overtaking is going to be a doddle anyway, and you didn't need probably to be able to run closer to the cars in front.
Yeah, the DRS change, I'm not sort of 100% why we needed it more than what we had before.
I guess it's another tool that the FIA can use.
Well, but we had a tool anyway, didn't we?
Yeah.
Why make it a bigger tool? You don't want to make it silly overtaking,
No.
do we? There's a lot of people that say it's silly enough as it is. But the one thing I would say about DRS is, in my experience, I remember going back. I think it was 99 again, following Fisichella in the Benetton, or Renault as it was then. And I had hardly any slipstream effect at all. And I think there's an element that the development of that has changed so much. If I go back to the original turbos, when they had their sort of 1400 qualifying
Massive rear
horsepower.
wing.
Yes, exactly. Massive rear wing, massive brakes and everything. Everything was just big because they didn't care about drag. There was no conscious thought about what drag could do, because all they used to do was turn up the boost, throw in a bit more fuel, get 1,500 horsepower in qualifying, and it didn't matter. That's completely changed now, where it's all about slickness. So the effect that you would have of slipstreaming, I think, compared to when I was doing it in the 90s, and I remember doing it in Formula 3, the same thing, is way, way less. So I think if you took it off, the overtaking would be minimal, absolutely minimal. So at least it gives and brings back the slipstream effect, which did the same thing anyway back in the, you did the 70s, when people harp on about all the good old days of the sort of the 70s. But they created such a big hole that was where that slipstreaming effect and overtaking came from. And again, that's just, to me, is just putting it back into effect. But I don't know why it's gone more. I suppose we're going to have to wait and see exactly what difference this potentially makes to that overtake. I don't want a simplistic overtake. They've got to work for it.
Well, back in the day, it was you'd plan it 5 corners in advance, wouldn't you? Anyway, let's talk about this man now and this team, Red Bull Honda. Are you excited about them?
I am.
Pray tell, why?
Well, I think it was the right choice with the change of the power unit. We know the history of the Honda not being quite where it needed to be for McLaren, and I think it's improved over the last 18 months quite a lot. Last year, I know there was a big chunk of change that sort of came their way latter part of the season. They were able to sort of have a look at the data through, obviously, the Toro Rosso, and they wouldn't be just taking the Honda just for the sake of taking it. They would have looked at what the Toro Rosso was doing, and then they would then analyse it to then say, right, is it worth doing it this year, as in for 2019, or maybe leaving it another year for 2020? And they obviously think it's better than what they had before.
And it wouldn't have been a financial decision, would it? The prospect of free power units wouldn't have been a factor for Red Bull because they've got the cash. It was based purely on.
There'll still be a little bit of that one. Yeah, Mateschitz, is a shrewd old businessman. He wouldn't just sort of say, no, forget about that. Honda, keep that. No, he's not going to do that. But it's more, you know how these guys work. I think everybody out there watching knows that they're racers, and they will try and do everything they possibly can to take it to the big teams like Ferrari and Mercedes. And this is that opportunity that it's the very early days of this partnership, and I'm sure it's only going to grow stronger, and you would expect Honda to get stronger, and they have shown glimpses of that, especially last season when I remember it passed, I think it was a Sauber, where it obviously had a Ferrari powered unit, and it passed in Mexico if I remember correctly, so it was something that it did show speed, so that's a positive thing. And now I hope that this is what can go together, as we see Sebastian catching up Vettel once again, following him. But I think the potential is very good.
But interesting too that Honda are going to get twice the amount of information now, because of course they've got Toro Rosso and Red Bull Racing, so it's going to drive everything forward. And you could, very well see something actually that someone in the team alluded to this morning, is that you could see Toro Rosso being scapegoat, but just being used to drive, if there's a power unit upgrade, put it on this one first.
As we saw last year, changing a lot. Yeah.
But and then if it's any good, put it onto the big team.
Of course.
And of course, it's interesting too that Kvyat here, who's back, third time lucky in the Red Bull family, but of course he was Ferrari's, what do we call him? Test driver,
simulator driver. Yeah, he did. He did a lot of work for Seb. Yeah,
so he will know Vettel well. Do I think it's a masterstroke by Toro Rosso to get Kvyat back in. I think because this is a simulator.
I didn't have any choice. There wasn't any other choices. But yes, I like him. He is quick,
and he's bringing information about the Ferrari
as
simulator.
Well. Yeah, true. Yeah,
he knows how Maranello works.
We know Red Bull like that. Yeah, so that side of things. Yeah, he's a talent. This boy, I like him a lot. He's. I tell you what's interesting. When he was racing and having all his incidents with, Carlos Sainz was going on the first lap, I remember, and I remember saying to him, I said, you can't get involved on the first lap like you're getting into. I said, if you lose 2 or 3 positions, lose 2 or 3 positions on the first lap, then build it up. Then once the confidence starts to really come, then you can start taking those calculated risks. At the moment, don't do it. And he said to me, I'm okay. And I think the okay was because Franz Tost likes him as well. So I think he was almost going, it's okay. Helmet marker, it's okay. But there's only a certain point, it is okay. And it got to that point where they went, it ain't okay. So there was a little bit of, he was immature, personally. And I'll tell you what was really interesting. About 2 weeks ago, I went with Rachel and we met him in the Dorchester for a cup of tea. A very different, but a very, very different Danny Kvyat. Grown up. Different. Completely different demeanour about him as well. Still talk, as we are. But it was just how his body language was. Completely different than before. There was almost... Yes, just grown up. Yeah. Just more grown up. So I hope that is something that in the cockpit, helmet on, it will bring out the talent that we saw, fighting with, in China with Sebastian on that first lap. Brilliant bit of racing. Actually doing very well against Ricciardo at the same time. Speed is there, for sure. But it's just all the other little silly mistakes that sort of were too often, to be honest. And you can't do that. He was very lucky to sort of be kept on as long as he did at Toro Rosso, because he was making so many silly mistakes, especially on the first lap. So I hope he has grown up. I think I felt he has, and I think that is going to be a good thing for us, because he's exciting, to be honest. He's different. He's a feisty little character, and that's good to see.
So often you don't know what you've got until you've lost it, and maybe that year away from racing will have
I think so.
Complete the process of growing up. Something I noticed with Max Verstappen, actually. I was with him a few weeks back at the FIA Stewards Seminar in Geneva. Yeah. Blown away by his maturity.
Oh, he's shaken off Jos. He's got the Jos out of him. Is that what he is?
He's got But look,
get his dad's.
But look, just look at. So we're looking at Carlos Sainz here. You see his barge boards.
Oh yeah.
This isn't live. You'll see replay in the top left-hand corner of the screen. This is from this morning. So McLaren's slow getting out, and that's interesting too. So he loses the barge boards, and it really does affect the balance of the car. To the extent that he then goes and.
Much more than we've probably seen last year, or in the last couple of seasons. We've seen a bit of damage go on, and it hasn't actually affected that much. So interesting that, one, they had the issue with the braking. That's probably just because they're a little bit too on the limit for probably lightness, typically. So they're going to have to make them a little bit stronger, a little bit more carbon fibre slapped on there. But it's the effect. Yeah, the effect was quite a big effect there, wasn't it?
It was a
big effect, yeah. I think what was interesting as well was sort of, it was good to see finally going out on track with Toro Rosso was all these spins, Albon, where he had that sort of spin in the outlap. We saw it with Kimi at the same time. And it's all, and I know, was it Roman sort of said about because it's the blankets, isn't it? They actually come out much cooler now. So once they get on track, they're even cooler again.
And cool conditions at the start of the day don't help.
Yeah. But you sort of know that. It's really, I find it quite amazing. You know it's going to be quite edgy on the first lap. So why there's this expectation in their heads it should be up to sort of maximum tyre temperature on the first lap when we go out, I think is silly. I think it's just part and parcel. You've got to be thinking about where you are, what the temperatures are, what the tyres are, the new tyres that you don't know fully how they react. Why you have to go out there and sort of spin off? I've done it myself personally, yes, but I know how edgy they are. The spin's simple, yes. The spin is simple. You can't do anything about it.
All the top guys were doing it as well.
Yes. No, I know. There is an edge, but I think sometimes it's in your head that we sort of had higher temperature blankets before. So actually, when you go out there, all your body feelings are what you had before, and it's sort of so easy to forget what the difference or what the change is to what. Probably the biggest change is actually to the tyre itself, and then it becomes, I think we've all experienced sort of being on ice, getting that lock-up, and once that lock-up comes, then the car will just go out of control. They're very, very similar. It's like a knife, and it's just basically we just fall one side or the other. You'll be damn lucky to stay in the middle, just if you just go 1% over the limit. They're very, very tricky, and of course all the torque that these modern engines have got as well. But it's something you sort of forget and you sort of take for granted almost. It's almost these guys, and I remember when I raced, it was like I was driving down to Tesco's. That was the feel.
That's why you weren't the big bucks, wasn't it, Johnny?
Yeah. What, driving down to Tesco as the delivery man. Yes, but it is how you slow everything down. But of course, that's when you become sort of sometimes a bit sort of blasé and overconfident with it, especially when it's a test at the same time. So there was nothing to them. And I think, you know, even with the blankets being a bit cooler, so what? Just give it another lap.
So Vettel there, we just saw a little lock-up from him. He's on a long run at the minute. Interesting that he's not trying to get past Kvyat. He goes right up under his rear wing, and then he doesn't try and overtake. He then drops back, has another go for a few laps, slows it down. So this is a long run from him. It's interesting that we're seeing the drivers set their quickest times in the morning. You said at the top of the hour that the thing about this place is the quick times are at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, but we haven't really seen them have a go at the end of the day so far this week. Maybe we'll see that next week when they start turning the wick up a little bit on the engines.
Maybe, but they also don't want to show too much as well. You know, you could. I know there was some I saw the other day. Someone was tweeting, "Go out there, put the softs on." But you put the softs on, and of course you're just going to show maybe a ridiculous amount of speed, and of course then everybody realises, oh, hello, we've got to sort of raise our game. Yeah. So sometimes you're not going to show when you're in the, which looks like the situation for Ferrari. They've got a good car, it's quick, but don't show too much. As soon as you show too much, someone like Mercedes, they're going to go, right, we need to ramp things up before we get to tomorrow.
And Johnny, you're confusing me. When you talk about the soft tyre, you're confusing me, because this week and next week we're talking about C1.
Yes,
C2,
there you go.
Okay.
Soft.
What is soft? Oh, C4. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm going to just stick to as it will be in the season. It will be soft, medium, and wonderfully hard.
Now, as we look at Carlos Sainz, we saw the replay earlier of him having his barge board issue, but that's obviously now back on. Quick, through turn 9, as something else has just flown off the car by the looks of things. I wonder what that was. Looked like it was on the left-hand side of the car.
It's got to be related to all that barge board stuff that's down the side there. Can't see anything flapping around. So
what's come off? So he runs pretty wide over the exit
curve. It's on the right, I think. It's on the right side.
It was on the right side, you think?
So.
Yeah. Oh, yes, it was right. It's barge balls again.
Yeah, definitely. More fibre. They're not listening.
Well, look, while he makes his way back to the pits as he comes underneath our comms box to go and stick another barge board on, one thing we will do is let's run through the time. So far, we've now got 3 hours and 4 minutes of this third day of pre-season testing to go. Top of the timesheets, Kimi Räikkönen in the Alfa Romeo with a 1:17.7, which is 4/10 faster than any other lap we've seen so far this week. Vettel is the only Ferrari driver out. He's P2. Then comes Hülkenberg, who did the morning in the Renault, and Ricciardo is in the car now. 4th fastest Kvyat. 5th is Verstappen. 6th Fittipaldi in the Haas. He's had a bit of running this week. Kevin Magnussen stopped early yesterday because of a headrest issue, and he carried on this morning, and then of course Grosjean jumped in the car at lunchtime and then had that issue. And just to quickly finish off, Sainz P7, Grosjean 8, Perez 9, Bottas 10, Hamilton 11 and Ricciardo 12. Well, let's head back down into the pit lane and find Nat. Where are you?
Williams, I'm having to resort to clandestine means of getting at information. Is peering behind the screens. Not a huge amount to tell you though, Tom, other than the fact that the communications officer at Williams has told me it wasn't one single issue, but rather a whole string of them that had the kind of domino effect on stopping them coming out until today. But I can tell you right now, they're fiddling around with the suspension. The nose is off. They are hoping to get it back out in about 20 minutes time. Have a look at these though. Oh,
hey Nat, he's behind you. He's behind you. He's behind you. I think George. Come on, George.
Quickly, just say hi.
Good afternoon.
Here he is, the man of the moment. So you've done it. You're out in an F1 car.
Yeah, no, it's nice. Obviously only an install lap so far, but it felt pretty surreal to drive it for the first time. And
are you confident about getting back out soon?
Oh yeah, definitely. This is the normal procedure. Just come in, do an install lap, make sure everything's all good, nothing's leaking, and so far so good.
Good stuff. Now get back in there. I don't want to get you in trouble. Thanks, George. Okay. I was going to show you these blowers, but that was much more interesting.
Well, show us the blowers. Okay,
show the blowers. Come on, show the blowers. Look at this. Oh, they're quite heavy, aren't they? Swanky new things.
It's not
So
your
they've
average
obviously
leaf
put their-
blower, is it?
No, it's not. They've obviously put their new
hairdryer.
sponsorship to good use and got some nice new blowers. There you go.
Thanks for that, Nat. Well, let's join Lewis Hamilton now back on track as he goes through turn 9. Talk to us about turn 9, Johnny.
Well, it's just one of those corners that really tests the driver. I think it's a fun corner, I think, more so. And of course, when it's a fun corner for a driver, he will always be trying to find that limit. Once he's hit that limit, he'll be then trying to move on to improve upon the car, to then improve upon that limit. So turn 9 is something that always really does give you a little bit of a hair standing up in the back of your neck, and it's always nice to have a fast corner. You know, there was a time where all these fast corners were almost getting turned away. I remember we had a Rouge. When they had that silly chicane at the bottom we went through in the mid-90s,
94, wasn't it?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Stupid things.
Yeah.
And actually, at turn 9 we had a chicane on the exit of turn. Yeah, it was on the exit of turn 9 as well. So we came here and I think I tested with it. I think we raced it as well. So I'm glad it's back, and I'm glad it's back in all its full glory.
Now, Johnny, I've loved your company. I want you to imagine you're at Le Mans and you're double stinting.
Oh, no.
You're double stinting. I'm not. They've said you're not fast enough. You're getting out. And taking over my comms, Alex Jack. Alex, come on in. We're going to just have to swap the headset and I'll be back here later.
Cool. Enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, Tom. Hello, Johnny. Hello, everyone.
Yeah,
at
you
home.
again.
Yeah, me again. You ready for another year of
indeed.
pure joy?
Oh,
And it
yes.
starts right here.
Good stuff, eh? It's good to have you back, Alex.
Nice to see you.
Listening to you yesterday on the train. Indeed.
How was your winter, Johnny?
Yeah, good. Yeah,
You might get asked this 3 times.
That's quite okay. Well, we could go into my daughter's wedding details if you wish. That's
Well, we
mainly,
could give
mainly
us
what my wife, not myself.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'd be surprised if you were completely across
moral
that.
support for getting that organised.
Just nodding and going,
May the 18th.
I agree with your decision a lot.
So it's been a nice time off, Alex. Yeah.
And now, back to the excitement of this. What have you made of it so far, your first day at testing?
Yeah, interesting. Again, I've been following it a little bit over the last couple of days. Been very impressed, like I said before, with the Ferrari. What I'm hoping for is, we've always been talking about 2 teams, but effectively sort of 2 drivers going for the World Championship. I want people to be added to that. I want the old Max to be involved at the same time. Leclerc. Wouldn't it be lovely, a youngster coming into play at the same time, and those 3 teams actually fighting each other properly, where it's been a bit, sporadic. We've seen with Red Bull winning sort of the odd one, actually having to make the others work hard to achieve that. So it looks as if we might have that chance when we get to Australia, because obviously it's always a bit difficult to read the whole situation, but that Ferrari seems to be just sort of out of the box. They can both drive it, they're both happy, and it happens pretty much, or did happen pretty much instantaneously on day one. Of course, the Mercedes, as we watch here with Lewis, they always carry fuel. We don't know how much, but we always know that they're going to be there or thereabouts, and equally so probably with Red Bull. They're probably more of the dark horse, because obviously the Honda we all expect is not going to be as powerful as the Ferrari and the Mercedes, but we don't really know. Well, but we don't really know, because we don't know the development obviously over the winter. We knew how it ended with the Toro Rosso, which, to be honest, I didn't think was that bad at all. Plus, there may be some other little bits that they've found as well. We know the Mercedes obviously is about sort of, let's say, economy efficiency.
Yep.
And that's something that probably the Honda hasn't got at the present time. But hopefully that sort of 5 kilo might sort of come into play a little bit in the races as well, obviously, because obviously it goes up from was it 105 to 110?
110 started off a few years ago at 100, then up to 105, now at the ball program was passed over. They didn't go for Antonio Felix da Costa. They promoted this man early. When Vettel left for Ferrari, they then promoted him to Red Bull early. And many of you out there will know the story after that. Getting a 3rd chance. Pretty unusual to get a 2nd chance, let alone a 3rd chance. question for you, Johnny, is are you surprised he's come back?
I'm not. I spoke a little bit with Tom about it. I'm not, because I think raw speed, there's a lot of raw speed.
Yes.
There's a lot of talent there. I think we saw that when he was up against Ricciardo. We saw that brilliant move, as I said before, in China with Sebastian. So he's a racer. It was just the incidents that we saw in Russia, obviously, in the race. The incidents that he was having with Carlos Sainz, I remember, I think I mentioned it before, at Silverstone.
Yeah.
And he had to grow up. And I do believe he has grown up. Met him a couple of weeks ago, and he does seem to be he's got a different demeanour about him. And I think he's had to do that. And I think he has realised, maybe through the experience he had at Ferrari, to be honest, and doing all that sim work for Sebastian, that things had to change. And he's had the opportunity, and I hope it all comes together for him, because I think for us, and even me as a fan of drivers and wanting to see him on the edge and show that skill, it's something that I think he can bring quite a lot to Formula One, and I think he will, personally.
We had his team principal, Franz Tost, up here in the morning session, and he was saying it's like the old Daniel is back. It's like the confident, assured, he's got out of the limelight, as you say. He was doing the sim work for Ferrari. Yeah. He's come back, and I think he's had a chance. This paddock, as you will know, Johnny, very easy place to be when it's all going well, and very lonely. Very difficult when it's all going wrong.
Very much, very, very, very lonely, and I think it's a situation that's very hard to deal with. I think we all go through difficult times in our lives. You know, having a difficult time in your life when you're a Formula One driver is quite a fortunate thing in one regard.
Yes.
But it
First
can
world
be
problems.
Yes, but it can be, you know, very much a difficult thing for a driver's career, because when it does go wrong, generally we don't see those people again. They disappear, and they just end up either doing Le Mans or GT racing or something else. It's something that they didn't want to do. I know a lot of the guys, Jason Plato, for example, raced with him in karts. Used to beat him quite easily, although we're in different classes. But I used to beat him. I would have beaten him easily.
This is why you brought him up.
Stuff like that. Yes, exactly. And again, he's got, you know, he wanted to do Formula One, but of course it didn't work out. He's done brilliantly in touring car, but it's not really what he wanted. And a lot of the guys are in it. They enjoy it. They enjoy the sort of the camaraderie they have with each other. But of course, there's always a journey that you're aiming for, and Formula One is obviously that thing. So there's a lot of drivers that never got there. So I always bring Tom Christiansen up at the same time. Tom, you know, his multiple selfish wins that he had at Le Mans. But he never really got the chance, or never got the chance. He did a bit of testing for Jaguar, if I remember correctly, when they were developing the Michelin tyres, and we never saw him, and should have done.
Yeah,
so there's many drivers historically that should have, didn't, just because of situations.
And you need things to align.
Yeah, you do.
A great example of that is the driver that we were commentating on together last year. This man's teammate, Alexander Albon, in the car yesterday. And I thought a refreshing honesty from Alexander to hear him say, I'm still getting used to the high-speed stuff, because as you've been saying, Johnny, this is the pinnacle. What do you expect to see from Alex this year? How quickly, take us inside the driver's mind, how quickly is he going to be, how long is it going to take for him to get comfortable behind the wheel of that car? When can we expect to see the talent that we saw in Formula 2?
Well, it's interesting, because remember when we were sort of doing our commentary in F2, I always thought he did a very good job. And I said, you know, he was one guy at that point who didn't have a team sort of backing him. He was almost on his own when you had George obviously with Mercedes and Lando and McLaren. He wasn't sort of linked to anybody. And he had been, as we know, with the Red Bull program a few years back. And he's done a very good job in F2. Nearly got himself in a second position. And had a shot into the last race of winning the championship against George. Didn't quite work out for him, unfortunately. Coming into Formula One, it's something, again, like I said, he had that dream. He's had that drive to get himself into F2 itself. I know his dad is a racer as well. That's my pen. And and
as soon as I went for the pen, I was like, he's not going to let me get away with that.
And you're not going to put me off. I shall have that straight back. There you go. He will be able to sort of settle in quite quickly. You know, these Formula One cars, are very much like a kart, a racing car, proper racing car. And that always stays with you. You never lose it. You never forget about it. You never lose those sensations that you get from the karting to the Formula 3 to the F2 and all the various other sort of races that you may be involved with. And you can use those once you get into Formula 1. So surprisingly, you'll probably adapt maybe quicker than you thought. I remember my first test I ever did. I went from Formula 3, so we had about 150 horsepower. To Brands Hatch, but it was the Indy circuit. It was only the short one. Yeah. And it was the old turbos, and it had about 1,100 horsepower, something like that. And I remember stalling it about 6 times just to get out of the pits. So that was quite embarrassing.
Amateur stuff.
And it was ridiculous, actually, because the clutches were like this.
It's the clutch's problem.
Proper swip. Well, of course it was. It wasn't my fault. Didn't have the data then, so I could blame it. So it was like a switch. So eventually I got out on the track. I remember going round paddock, and it sort of goes down and then up as you go towards Drury. So I thought, right, okay. And I've got my neck's going, a little bit Del Boy, a little bit of the old side neck going. I thought, right, let's see what this thing's got. You wanted more, and then when you got used to that one, you wanted more. So you always wanted to get more speed through the faster corners, acceleration, braking, because that's what sort of how our DNA sort of works. It's something that you want to be on the edge. You get a thrill from being on the edge, and once you get on the edge, well, you're there. That is the edge. So now I want more.
Yeah.
So I think he'll be able to adapt pretty okay. He's up against someone who's I think is going to be very, very, very tough for him as well. But I think that's a good thing. I always think when you're young and you have someone who is mighty quick, I think you learn a lot from it in a very sort of short space of time. And Alex he's an intelligent lad.
He really is.
Yeah, he's a very, very decent guy as well. Very, very easy to talk to, isn't he? Very, really sort of.
I think he's going to win a lot of fans this year.
Yes, I think he will.
He's open and he's honest,
yeah.
and he's bided his time. Yeah. And he had the look of someone yesterday after he did more than 100 laps after that spin into the gravel early on because of a car problem that he was just reveling in being a Formula 1 driver.
Was it? Is that what they said?
Yes, initially. It was not a simple spin.
Oh, okay.
It was a problem with the steering. So what looked like a terrible opening minute to his Formula 1 career was in fact.
As I said earlier, and that can happen. I've done it a few times. In fact, I wasn't best one I ever heard, which was actually never got to the track. I think it was Nelson Piquet. I'm sure it's Nelson Piquet.
Okay.
I don't know which car he was in, but it was at Silverstone in the old Silverstone garages, and I heard he tried to sort of shoot out of the garage as quick as he could, and he threw out of the garage as quick as he could, but he actually drove straight into the pit wall because he came out far too quick. Typical Nelson. So he actually only moved about 10 metres.
Amazing.
So that's the most
stuff,
embarrassing. Yes.
As bad as it gets. Okay, right, let's head down to Natalie Pinkham, who's in the pit lane for us.
Aha. Not just the pit lane, I'm up against the pit wall, a place that I have never actually been before when the cars are on track. So I feel excited and a little bit nervous, but no, it's an amazing vantage point here. We've just seen Daniel Ricciardo go out. His teammate, of course, clocked up a healthy 63 laps in the car today. We're going to try and talk to Cyril tonight's review show. In the meantime, given I had such luck finding George Russell when I peeked behind the screens, I'm going to try and do the same at McLaren. Wish me luck.
Seems like a plan to me. They're very brave to take on the screens. Of course, we don't have the screens normally. They're banned. And I think if we cover testing in the future, they should also be banned.
Yeah, absolutely right. I was watching yesterday on the train coming from London, and I think it must be McLaren. And then the car came in, and you sort of go, what are you doing? There is no need personally for it. I know they're all secret squirrel at the present time, trying to hide everything they've got. But what are they going to show? As soon as it drives out, snap, 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 snap.
Well, I was going to say exactly the same.
That really doesn't really matter.
It's the funniest thing. Just before I came into the commentary box, I was watching from the roof of the pit building here, and every single time a car comes into the pits, there's a stampede of photographers, and they've got netting up so they don't drop anything onto the pit lane here. But there's still a gap, and they're getting the massive lenses to get that shot, and immediately the teams would. So the screen's not entirely required.
And I tell you what was not good either. There was the pit lane was sort of in the break, was open to the fans.
Yes,
there were some fans winding up and down. I did a couple of pictures with a few of them. A lot of Brits always make the effort to come across.
Your adoring public.
Yes, all they could see was me. Because the cars, they couldn't see.
That's not what they've paid for, is it?
Exactly. I was as good as it gets. But yes,
send Johnny downstairs because the screens are up.
Yeah, but they're walking up and down, and they can't see anything. And you think,
it's a shame.
That's not fair for them. Those guys, I had to slip through the garages just to have a little look at a Racing Point, for example, because I hadn't seen them. I've seen them sort of on their launches. I've seen them a little bit on track, but see them actually up sort of right in front of you is obviously a different matter. So I was able to do it only that way because, again, they had all the covers not allowing anybody to look in.
One thing you saw vibrating on the back there, the aero part behind the halo and Sebastian Vettel at the very back of the car, just before the front wing, called the coat hanger. Tell us what that's doing, Johnny.
Well, it just sort of helps guide the air, basically. It's all, it's all about sort of guiding the air. It's a little bit more difficult this year, especially with the front end being changed so much with the wing, and where that air then is sort of channeled either as it used to be around that tyre, but also through and under the floor and up the back. But of course the rear wing is obviously a very important part as well. So it's just channeling that air and just getting that efficiency to be at its height. And of course they're so restricted of where they can put certain elements on the car with certain dimensions, and that's why that's quite a small little coat hanger, as you say, sort of hanging out the back. They all vary. Some sort of flap around like that sort of Ferrari is, and some are sort of quite sturdy. I think McLaren is like a single little wire coming out the back. So they all have this. Again, they're all different ideas where it is. I'll tell you one thing I'm liking as well is actually the wing, isn't it? The rear wing. Higher, bigger, looks a bit more manly. A bit more manly.
These cars were butched up a few years ago. The perception that they wanted to address was that anyone could get in and drive it rapidly, immediately. You wanted to see the cars on the limit, on the edge a bit more. That's why they made it wider. That's why they've got the wide tyres at the back. And now, as Johnny says, the wing changes wider at the front, slightly higher, slightly wider at the rear for 2019 as well. Sebastian Vettel has the second fastest time. Probably a good time with 16 minutes past 3 local time to run you through the order so far today, which is seen Kimi Räikkönen on the softest tyre available to him to a 1:17.7. He's in first position. Then it's this man right here, Sebastian Vettel, in second. Hulkenberg is third, ahead of Kvyat in fourth. Verstappen is fifth. Then we had Fittipaldi, who stopped out on circuit earlier on. And then Sainz is seventh, Grosjean eighth, Perez in ninth. Then Ricciardo, Bottas and Hamilton. Looking at Perez in the pits.
Yeah, so that detail there on the barge boards and sort of actually just in front of the radiator duct there. There's some real sort of tricky little stuff going on. When we saw a little shot of the Williams going out, so very sort of basic, wasn't it? But it was very basic, very little curved at the top. It's got none of those little slotty elements that they've got. So again, he's having lunch. So I
will leave it to you. Believe me, there have been a lot of hours this morning, and we're going to do the final hour as well. It's a great point that if you certainly look at the Ferrari and McLaren have tried something different there in the sort of barge board area. Good to compare it right now to what has been the chassis benchmark for
you see it there with
a
the
few
Red
years.
Bull.
You see all
quite
the
different
intricacies.
as well. Yeah.
And that is one area. There's parts of the car where you are not allowed to add anything at all. If you remember, in previous years there would have been all sorts of flicks over the rear wheels. They were banned a few years ago, which is why we now have the Coke bottle shapes. Other soft drinks are available, etc., etc., at the back of the car there. And Max Verstappen who has completed 55 laps today. Compare that to Sebastian Vettel, who's only gone over 100 again. That Ferrari looking rapid, the direction change looking phenomenal, and it's looking bulletproof as well right now. Lewis Hamilton saying earlier today they're looking very, very quick, and you can't deny that. They've had a terrific start as they try to end this barren run without a title.
Yes, well, again, it seems Sebastian's in a happy place. I think he's going to be pushed big time by Leclerc, by the look of the way that Charles just got in and was able to, bang in a time quite easily. So I think that's a positive thing for Ferrari, the team itself. And Sebastian, I think, will be very hungry in seems to be anyway, from what he said, sort of a happier situation that with the change, with Arriva Bene obviously moving out. And that seems to have maybe just given him that little extra edge that he needs to take against, someone like Lewis, who I think is driving at his very, very best, peaking, I think. And he will need everything to be able to beat him. And I think that's fascinating for us, because I think with everything we see at the moment, the fuel loads are obviously going to be high with that Mercedes. And of course this Red Bull hopefully coming into play at the same time. One thing I noticed as well, I remember there was all that talk last year about sort of the rotation of that Mercedes. It was able to really turn in a positive way.
Let's have a look at the barge boards, the points that you were making.
Yeah.
We'll come back to the point about the Mercedes.
You saw the Force India, how different they are, especially it's sort of quite high at the front there of that sort of logo that it's got, and those little pockets of winglets that they've got sort of at the side, just at the side of the air, intake, cooling intake. So it's quite interesting to see how from that front wing. So you can see some little strips there as well. I can't see them on the left side there. So there's some fine detail there as well, a little bit deeper and further forward of those front wheels. So again, just philosophy. It's interesting to see how different they are.
And the philosophy that is so affected by that new wider front wing. And what we've seen in the opening few days is the fact that some teams have gone down one route. With Ferrari, if you look, there's tails down at the end plates. The most extreme version of this is the Alpha, which just has a gap. It does not go to the end of the front wing, and that, of course, affects the car that runs all the way to the back. So it all starts with the front wing. It's conditioning the air from there, and that is why the change, it's why you had a few teams, I know Christian Horner wasn't particularly happy about it, because changing the front wing means a completely different direction for everyone to go in with the air moving past.
Yeah, no, exactly. Again, it changes the whole car effectively, because of everything. It's just trying to channel it mainly under the floor to sort of grab onto the rear end. But of course, you need that front end initially to be stable. When you drive a car, of course, braking is obviously so it's going to be very, very important to have stability at the back end. Once you then sort of go through the gears, turning, get a bit of yaw in the car, body roll at the same time, at that point, the front end has then got to come alive, and then that's where the Mercedes seem to have sort of the advantage consistently at different tracks that we went to, where the Ferrari wasn't quite able sometimes to challenge it. And I think that rotation, as I said, what I was going on to is I noticed, I think it was yesterday or the first day, I can't remember what it was, and it was going through the final chicane, and it had a very similar rotation effect than what we'd sort of seen with the Mercedes. So I wonder if they have found just a little something that is going to give them that little edge with that Honda power unit that is going to put them more into play, because I think the front end obviously is going to be very restrictive nowadays with the understeer, which then would destroy the tyre. So it's going to be sort of a lot of hard work to get this whole front end to link together all the way through, and especially sort of under that floor to the back. We had all that big stuff going on. I think sort of Simon Lazenby mentioned about it, the outwash that we've been discussing. And
who let him
into
into
the
presenter commentary divide
designer,
was shattered.
Designer Lazenby.
No, I thought he did very well, and I thought he made a terrific point with that.
It was good, and it is. And it's all these little elements that are sort of really, they have to change their philosophy. But it's amazing how quick they change it as well. Again, when we have all that sort of paint on the car as well, that gives them such a good idea. Yes, they can sort of stick it in a wind tunnel and have a good idea. But
yeah,
of course, on track, the flow vids, but on track, it always is something completely different because of just the way that the air, the wind moves around inconsistently. And that's what nature, they've got to fight against nature. They're pretty much fighting against it sort of anyway with the amount of downforce that these things sort of produce. But it's great to see how these cars are reacting. And as I said, to me, the most important thing is going to get that sort of front end to hook up, especially if we go through that turn 4.
Yes.
Long right-hander. It's punishing on tyres. Punishing
really
on tyres.
Is.
It's never really your rear that you have to worry about too much. It's always going to be that front end.
And you can see the front of Daniel Ricciardo's tyre there as he comes into turn number 1, having done a 1:22.8.
Yeah.
A reminder that the ultimate time today so far on the softest compound of tyre available is a 1:17.7 to show you how we don't know the fuel loads, of course. Kimi Raikkonen, car number 1, at least in terms of the order, makes his way through the final chicane, now into the final corner. Is the question for Ferrari not about whether they can bring a fast car? Is the question for Ferrari whether they can develop that car across the year? Because we traditionally see Red Bull very, very strong with their development program. Certainly if you think about how well Max Verstappen was doing at the end of last year, he was constantly competing for wins, maybe at circuits where we wouldn't have expected that for Red Bull. Their development is huge. Ferrari, is there a question mark on them developing all the way through a season?
I think it's 3 things, and I think the first one is obviously what we sort of see in the early part of this testing that we've had there this week, and I think that's a plus. That's a good tick because I think the cars come out of the box very, very quickly. I think the second thing is obviously it's then the drivers, the comfort that the drivers have within the team structure.
Yes.
And I think that is something that has maybe been lacking, and I think that just moves on to the third point, that little bit more, that Ferrari have got to be able to do it for a whole season.
Yeah.
And that seems to be where Mercedes have been able to do that. If you go historically to what sort of Ferrari did with Michael and then Benetton, and maybe going back to sort of the height of the McLaren days, Williams, where the consistency the whole way through the season enabled them to get those championships. And the driver as well, I've got to, I saw Sebastian will be putting his hand up very quickly to say, I made errors, and he's got to get rid of those errors at the same time. But that sometimes comes from the environment within as well, that there's extra pressure and unnecessary pressure that is then thrust upon someone's shoulders. And I think, to me, you didn't see any of that with Lewis. There was no pressure. It was all sort of taken off.
Yeah.
And it almost came across.
He was left to focus on.
Yes, and focus on what he does good at. And it almost come across that it was just, there was not that weight being helped off of Sebastian's shoulders. And from what he's commented on with the changes that have happened, it sounds as if there is a bit of weight coming off. Now that weight is only going to make him better.
Yes.
And stronger mentally. And I think when you've got sort of a stronger driver, wherever he is on the grid, front or back, you're going to get a better performing driver, and most importantly, a consistent one as well. So I think that's what we're going to see this year. It's just what Leclerc does.
Well, that is the
the
bizarre contrast to Ferrari, because they've got a new team principal, Matteo Binotto, who has come in and replaced Maurizio Arriva-Bene, and he was saying we're going to favour Sebastian, and clearly trying to give his driver, who has, of course, 4 world titles to his name, a little bit of confidence after that horrible run, you have to say, with the contact with Verstappen and then spinning, and then he comes into this year, he has a spring in his step in the paddock, he has a car that looks bulletproof. It looks very strong. It doesn't have Mercedes worried, but it has Mercedes noting that it looks very, very quick.
Indeed.
And it's all looking terrific, happy, sunny and rosy, apart from the rapid driver on the other side of the garage.
Yeah.
From a driver's point of view, will he have been irritated that it's Kimi Raikkonen disappearing, and who he had a great relationship with, and then this upstart in Charles Leclerc, the champion of Formula 2 a couple of years ago, and a fantastic rookie season for him? Would he have been irritated by that signing?
Well, I'd hope to think it was a bit like I used to think. I wanted a challenge. I wanted to be sort of pushed to the very, very edge. Whatever, if I was karting, Formula 3, Formula 3000, or whatever it may be, Formula 1, Le Mans, whatever. So I've always wanted to have that sort of battle and challenge. Now, he was happy with the situation that he had with Koenig. I think he always felt he wasn't a proper threat. And that's something that you need to do. Michael was very good at that. And I think, Senna and Prost, they had their little battles together, so it was a similar thing that you don't want sometimes, because that can be very destructive within. And what is needed, I suppose, from Sebastian is just to focus on Sebastian. That's all he can do. If he starts looking across the garage at his teammate, that's just going to interfere with his mindset. I think he's strong enough to deal with it. Well, he is strong enough to deal with it. It's a four-time world championship, four-time world champion. So that is something that is not going to be new. I think he had an element of that with Mark Webber, but we'll see.
It will be very interesting indeed to see how that dynamic plays out in 2019. It's going to be one of the very, very interesting points of this championship. So Lewis Hamilton making his way through the fast sweeps that define this racetrack. Honestly, Johnny, do the drivers enjoy this circuit?
Yeah, it's a challenge. And this type of circuit, again, you've got quite a different variety of corners. You've got that sort of first turn, a lot of hard braking, change. It's quite slow, actually, on the initial right first turn. But then it's that change of direction for turn 2. It's that then not running too wide and then too tight for turn 3, which then is sort of, right on the edge of being flat out. Generally for these guys nowadays, but it's a real good buzz that you get from it. So you get through turn 3, turn 4 comes into play.
Yep.
As I said before, it's sort of quite flat going into 4, but then as you get sort of apex exit, it starts to drop away, a little bit off camber as well. Then that challenge comes into play, and of course then you go up probably from turn 8, 7, sort of turn 7, turn 8, 9. It's a nice flowy change of direction, very quick. On the edge, using the curb, not overstepping the mark, because if you do, the grass will spit you off into the wall on the inside. And then I'm not a fan of the final sort of sector anymore, just because of that final chicane.
Yes.
I prefer what we had of the
which is still there.
It's still there.
It's the worst part.
But it's nowhere near the speed.
Look what you could have won.
Yes, exactly. I'd love that sort of edge. As we were coming out of this last time, I know there was quite a few incidents and accidents happened on the outside of the last turn, but again, that was the challenge, because it was to get the start of the lap perfect. Then when the tyre was sort of worn itself out, you had to get through it basically flat out again, and it was always sort of moving around underneath you, but you had to get your foot flat, and that was the buzz that you get. So yes, the drivers do like coming here. It's much better now, actually, at this time of year, because it's quite cool.
Yep.
The track's normally sort of better for the speed. It's when you come to a Grand Prix weekend, and if you get a very, very hot one, the track's quite a difficult one.
Yeah.
A bit of a beast, because the tyres don't like the temperature, but then don't like the sort of temperature that's in the tarmac itself. And then the car sort of moves around a lot more. You haven't got that planted testing feeling that you sort of get early on. So it'd be lovely, actually. Maybe I should do a Grand Prix this time of year.
Maybe we should start with this.
No, you're talking as it is. No,
you're talking us into an early start.
No, we're not.
Already
no,
going into December in 2019.
No.
Final Grand Prix of the year in December. It's a long way to Abu Dhabi.
I'll leave you with that one. No. Great track.
It's really interesting to hear that, because I'm glad the drivers enjoy it because of the amount of laps that they're doing around this place. Every single driver, even someone like Alexander Albon, who has not been even a test for Formula One before this week. It's very unusual for a Formula One driver not to have any real meaningful Formula One running until he's actually signed the deal to become a race driver. Very unusual compared to what we would have seen in previous seasons, but it's good to know that drivers enjoy the challenge of this 4.6 kilometre, 2.8 mile circuit. Okay, Sebastian Vettel continuing to circulate. We've spoken about Charles Leclerc and the challenge that he's going to provide. It will be fascinating to see the times yesterday, pretty much identical programs, half a tenth between Vettel and Leclerc. And the question does not seem to be in the paddock, can he be as quick? The questions are, can he take the fight in all aspects of his driving and his championship building? Yes. To Vettel. What's your read on that?
Well, I think if we look at Valtteri Bottas, he was very unlucky last year, which probably didn't aid sort of his season, especially when we saw him. He should have won in, was it China? I remember that was a race that was sort of in his pocket, basically.
Yeah, Baku as well.
Baku was the other one, of course. And it's those things that, when they're taken away like they were, it sort of just interferes with the rest of the season when your teammate, one is Lewis Hamilton, and Lewis Hamilton driving at his very, very best. Now, to beat, which is what Nico did, to be perfectly honest, Nico Rosberg, was he was good everywhere they went, and he pushed him everywhere. Okay, wasn't as quick every time, but he was always there. He was always a pain in his bottom for Lewis, and that pressure was something eventually got him that championship. Now, Valtteri's in the same position. It's got to go a whole year.
Yeah.
And that's where Charles is in the same position. It's, we can come here to Barcelona, we can have no pressure on our shoulders, we can get in the car, feel comfortable and think this is great, this is easy type thing. And of course, when the season starts, we always have to remember it is Ferrari, and there is a very different never experienced it, but there's definitely a different pressure on you, just because of what happened back in Italy.
The sort of racing for a nation.
Yes, and I think that's something that, they can be very critical. They can be very damning sometimes when you do make an error, which humans do.
They do
sometimes.
Have a sports newspaper over there, don't they? Dedicated, and if things don't go well, certainly after the Italian Grand Prix, there's a rather brutal headline about Ferrari imploding or something along those lines.
Yeah, sure. So again,
they're put under the microscope in a different way.
And that's where you've got to be able to almost distance yourself from that. Sometimes that's very, very hard, because that help has got to come from within at the same time to sort of give you that feeling of support, which sometimes some teams in the past haven't been able to do that. They've only been able to deal. This is the good thing about modern day Formula One, is they can deal with two drivers. They can supply two drivers. The same stuff. And there was a lot of teams back in the day that didn't and couldn't do that.
Well, you're speaking of two drivers. How about three? We can hear Esteban Ocon, who's the reserve driver for Mercedes, having to sit out this year of Formula One, at least at the start. This is what he had to say to Rosanna Tennant earlier on.
Yes, I am with Esteban Ocon, and you do like your esports, don't you? They were just talking about that.
I do. I compete a lot online, actually.
Are you in the sim a bit? Are you doing a bit of esports to keep your hand in it?
I'm doing a lot of simulator, those days, sure. I did all the testing, previous to this test. So, I'm very much in touch with the team. I spend a lot of time in Brackley and a lot of time with the team together. So, it's good, it's a good new role. It's very interesting. I'm learning a lot in those days, but for sure I look forward to test the car.
Yeah, it's sad not to see you out on track, but it is great to see you in the Mercedes kit. I know you said you've been working with them, but how have you been settling in?
Yeah, I've been settling well. I mean, getting to know everyone, taking my role with pleasure, being part of this fantastic team is such a pleasure, and it's very special. They've been world champion and very successful. So, as I said, I'm learning every day.
And what about here in Barcelona? What's your role with the team on days like this?
Yeah, I'm listening to all the meeting, being here if I need to jump in the car at some point, and going around the track, just telling the team how the other cars are also behaving, and just trying to listen to keep up with everything.
That's cool. So you're a bit of a spy.
I am as well. Yeah. I'm multitasking.
I love that. That's great. We're going to look out for you on our track cameras. Is it a bit like a race weekend? So when the guys come back in, you're looking at the data and poring over it like you would maybe on a Saturday night on a race weekend?
Yeah, exactly. I'm maybe not driving, but it's the same. I'm working the same as if I was not. I'm looking to Valtteri's and Lewis data, and speaking to different departments to pick up bits. Listening to Lewis, in debrief is something great, because you see how he works and how intense he pick up things, and it's very impressive to see him work. So yeah, as I said, I'm learning from him.
And will you be learning from him and Valtteri throughout the season? You're going to be coming to races as well. Will we see you trackside?
All the races, I will be coming as soon.
Great, that's so good. We like that.
As soon as the car fires up, I'm here. In the European races, I will be doing the simulator on Fridays, so you won't see me on Friday, but I will be flying on Friday night. And because of that, I'm aware of all the testing going on.
How does that work then? You're in the simulator on a Friday. The guys are here at the track on the track. You've got race support back in Brackley. You've got engineers here. What's your role as a simulator driver on a Friday? What are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm looking at all the testing the team didn't have time to do during practice, or to validate a test they want to have on the Saturday. And then if it's positive, they will test it on track on qualifying or just before in FP3.
That's exciting. That's very exciting. And are you enjoying being in Barcelona? It's funny being back, isn't it, with everyone sort of back to school?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a good feeling to to be back working, and I'm maybe not driving, but I'm here. I see the cars running, so I'm very hungry to wait and get in.
I love that with you. Such a good smile always, Esteban. Back to you guys in the commentary box.
So that was Esteban Ocon, who is facing a year on the sidelines, but doesn't seem to be too down about it at all. Are you surprised by that, Johnny?
Still smiling.
Yeah.
I think it's what you expect with Esteban, to be honest. Yeah, again, it's a frustrating thing for a driver to be out of the car when he wants to be, obviously, in the car itself, on track racing against all these great drivers. The situation is not probably a bad one for him. It'll really probably be down to what Valtteri does, I would imagine, for when, if there is that change going to come along. But it's not the first time I've seen it.
No.
Mika Hakkinen.
Well, that's a great example.
When we were together at Lotus.
It's got to be a great motivation for Esteban that it is possible to be sort of, have to take the back seat, have to take a year out of the sport, but still come back. And look at what Mika did, world champion in 1998 and 1999. Yeah, sure.
A little bit less time he had out, but he was basically out from the beginning of the season until Portugal, when he out qualified Ayrton, which was pretty mighty. So it just shows that it can be done. He was doing testing, which was proper testing back in those days as well. Actually behind the wheel.
Testing. Unlike this nonsense.
Well, for Esteban, there is no testing.
Yeah. So in the past, he would have been
testing here, or Red, or Silverstone, or wherever they were going to. So he would have always been in the car, never been out of it. It's a little bit different nowadays, obviously, because we have only these sort of 8 days, prior to the season started. Very different sort of situation for the drivers, because it's horrible. I wanted to, when I was driving, I wanted to be in the car all the time. If I could be in it 5 times a week, have weekends off, of course, but if I was in it 5 times a week, I would have loved that, because that was what I got a buzz from, and I love doing. So it's not quite the same as Mika, but it is, because he wasn't racing, and this is the same thing for Esteban.
What positives can he draw from having to take a year back? He is going to be around the team that, make no bones about it, he wants to be in for 2020. Can he try and build some relationships there? What can you do from the sidelines? Yeah,
it's relationships, and then it's all down to sort of learning. He's still a young lad. There's still lots to learn from Lewis, and even Valtteri, to be perfectly honest. So there's a lot of things you can take away from a weekend and a season of not actually being in the car itself. The talent, some people say you're out of the car and you never get it back. I don't agree with that at all. The talent's there.
Yeah.
Kvyat, I think, hopefully will sort of prove that to be the case. Because I think in any sport, it's like riding a bike. You ride a bike, you fall off it, you might go to hospital, you get back out and you go on a bike and you ride the bike again. So the feelings and the senses don't change. Does the sport change within that year? A bit, but not a lot. But I think you grow with it as well. He's still going to be very much involved in the team itself, or knowing what's going on, maybe sitting on briefings as well. So all that is something that just keeps that mind ticking over. I'm ready, and when that opportunity comes, I can do the job. And that's what he is. And luckily, he's that laid-back, smiley, happy character that will be able to get through the year as a smiley, happy character. And that's great, because I think that will only benefit him when the chance comes. And I hope it does, because I think we all will miss him in the season, because he's great to watch. You know, the little feisty little incidents that we've seen with him and Sergio,
wow,
and the team having to deal with all that.
This is what I was going to ask
But it's great. All that stuff is brilliant, and that's what we want to see. We don't want to see all nicey and after you, sir, and after you. That's not.
This is
proper
Formula
racing.
One.
Well, it's racing.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if it's Formula One or karting or Le Mans or whatever. Racing is racing, and racing is what all of us, and especially these guys on track, have learnt that skill set over their careers in motorsport.
It's very interesting that you bring up the contact he's had through his career with his then teammate Sergio Perez. Does that place a little bit of a question mark over team harmony? Because there's no doubting Esteban's speed, but the one thing that Valtteri Bottas has brought Mercedes after replacing Rosberg is speed, and he's very much been a team player, as we saw in Russia last year.
Yeah.
Will that be a factor, or are they just going to look at who's the quickest
I think
driver?
there was always supposed to be a factor with Fernando, but they didn't really sort of want to take the risk of having Fernando in there, because Fernando is a little bit more the Latin temperament, the fire Latin temperament that comes out. You know, we're going to miss him as well. But unfortunately, the situation that sort of happened over the last sort of 5 or so years didn't enable him to sort of go anywhere else, which was a shame for the talent that was there. So anyway, so for Esteban, the positive thing he's got Toto, and Toto will be able to back him, and when you've got backing, that always helps.
All right, let's go downstairs one more time to Natalie.
Hi, yes, and great to see you. This morning was a bit tricky. You got a fair amount of laps in, 48 was it?
Yeah.
Before the failure of the car. Just tell us about it.
No, it was really good morning. We got a lot of laps in. That was the goal of this morning, get a lot of miles in the car. And, you know, we went through the whole test plan that we wanted to go through. So it was really good. I got comfortable in the car. I adapted quite quickly. I was surprised, and the car felt really good. It was unfortunate we had a small electrical problem towards the end of the morning, but car went back to the garage. They fixed it quick, and I went back out for another run. And, you know, it was a great test. And hopefully it goes well this afternoon with Roman in the car.
And what about the rest of the year for you? So what's your title within the team, and what does that mean in actual terms? How often are you going to get in the car?
Yeah, so I'm the test driver for the team. And, you know, the testing nowadays are quite limited in Formula One. I think it's 4 days of in-season testing. So quite sure I'll be testing, you know, throughout the season. And a lot of the work also, you know, nowadays, since there's a test ban, it's all on the simulator. So every week we're doing work on the simulator, which is a lot of work, but it's good because I'm learning a lot and, you know, trying to help the team develop the car as much as possible when I'm on the simulator and when I'm testing the car as well. So it's always a good opportunity it's always amazing when you get the chance to drive a Formula One car.
Bet. Exciting times for you and for your family. Great to have the name Fittipaldi back in the sport. How proud are you and the whole family?
No, of course I'm proud. Obviously, the goal is one day to be a race driver on the grid. That's the goal. And but to be able to test and to be able to be working with the Formula One team so closely is great. It's something to be proud of. My family's happy as well, but we're going to keep pushing, yeah.
A little bit of pressure as well?
No, I mean, the pressure is part of it. I mean, you know, in all competitive sport, there's going to be pressure. But at the end of the day, I'm doing what I love. And, you know, my goal is always to be out there winning races. So there's no one that can put more pressure on me than I put on myself, you know, because I want to do well, you know.
You know what? You can see that by the big smile on your face. It's lovely to have you. Great addition to the sport.
Thank you.
How good was that to see a Fittipaldi on the racetrack in a black and gold car earlier today, Johnny?
With an accent I've never heard so clearly American from a Brazilian as well.
You could tell he was a Fittipaldi.
Yeah, indeed, you certainly could. Yeah, the black and gold is quite fitting, isn't it, with old Emerson doing the old JPS many years ago. So yeah, it's interesting to see. Nice young lad, seems to have this sort of Fittipaldiness about him, which is well, if it works out for him, can carry him very far, because his his ability, his racecraft, I think, has been sort of pretty impressive with what I've seen, and I think that's something that will really come to the fore when he get himself in a proper position in a Formula One team. So let's hope so. It'd be great to have that name back in Formula One.
And he came to a stop in the morning session, something we saw again with Haas this afternoon in the opening hour. Also, to recap what's happened today, Carlos Sainz had a spin down at the turn 15 chicane, didn't make the chicane, ended up in the old part of the circuit that we were talking about afterwards. Then Romain Grosjean coming to a halt for Haas, and that's their third stoppage of the test so far with a technical issue. And if you are just joining us, Williams have made it to the test, and they have posted one lap with George Russell earlier on. That brings us up to date in what is turning into a much nicer afternoon than morning. It's a bit chilly, it was a bit cold and overcast earlier on, and the sun has broken through. Good news for the teams. We heard from Franz Tost earlier in the weekend that he was almost frustrated about how cold it was in the mornings here. That has been rectified by the sun this afternoon. Now, he's been speaking about the third driver for this team as we see Hamilton go down to turn number 1, Esteban Ocon, and also mentioned Williams had a bit of a difficult time. Don't want to focus on that so much because I think that's been covered a fair bit in the last couple of days, but do want to focus on what is a phenomenal story, the return to Formula One for Robert Kubica.
Yeah, isn't it just? It's a brilliant story, of course, as we all know. There's a lot of doubters out there, say that it's not sort of possible, it shouldn't happen. Some say it's sort of a bit dangerous. Personally, I think it's a good thing. I don't see quick, lovely right-hander at the top down to the back straight as he flies through there. See the steering angle, it's very nice and smooth with that Alfa Romeo. And I love left and then second left, because it really does lean on the rear end. You need a very, very stable, not much actual steering going on there. We'll see him board. So lovely to see. But this is just typical classic Kimi, that smoothness that he's got in the steering, but then the ability to actually then plant the throttle at the same time without the car really sort of giving any bad kicks. So at the moment, I have to say, Kimi, Alfa, not looking that bad. And as we can hear all that, there's that skimming and touching you can hear underneath the car with the floor sort of on the ground.
That
Lovely
Alfa,
stuff.
it really does look together, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's nice because it just seems to have a balance. It's very difficult, I have to say, because they all look quite good. But the Alfa, I think the Ferrari definitely, they have very similar traits, surprisingly. I don't know why that would be, but they've got similar traits. The Renault earlier on, I think I only saw when I was watching yesterday. I think it was yesterday. That looked quite good as well. Change of direction. Remember the final chicane looked very good as well. It's good to see the Williams back on track.
This
That's
is
nice.
entirely it. Today is very much a shakedown day for Williams as the Ferrari goes past. Great to see them out. I was down in pit lane when they rolled the car out of the garage for the first time, and there was a round of applause from the grandstand and from the other teams to see them all actually finally out on track. It's good to see that community spirit still exists.
It does. I think I'm one of those. I hope every year, and I have done probably for the last 10 or more years, that they have a good year.
Yes.
And we've had some sort of good ones.
So they're everyone's sort of second favourite team,
yes,
aren't they?
It is. It's amazing. That's still there, though.
Yeah.
And that was created by, Frank many, many years ago. And it's still with us today. And I think it's great. And let's hope that it all does come together, especially when we've got a Brit sitting in that seat at the same time. So
Interesting.
Mr. Russell has a good season.
The side pods, very distinct cut back. It looks like a sort of a set of quite rounded hips.
Yeah.
On that one.
The barge balls are quite plain, actually, the barge ball, and it's got a little scoopy, can't really see it there on screen. It's a little bit more going on a bit of the side of the bodywork, but it's quite a plain looking side barge balls at the moment. But again, they will be looking, analysing the others, and then trying to react.
This is it. I mean, particularly for them, they've had a couple of days to do nothing but look at everybody else and see what's working.
I don't think they had time to look at anybody else.
No, to be honest,
no TVs,
I don't
no
think
nothing.
They do. I don't think they did. I think poor old Paddy's had enough on his plate over the last couple of days.
Race team has.
Yeah.
The race team were very involved, I think, getting this thing.
Yeah.
So it's everybody working on it.
We talk about looking at other teams and looking at what they've done. What have you seen that's impressed you from any of the other teams?
I think the one thing is obviously the amount of laps that they're all being able to achieve. Ferrari, yes, but I think everybody's still able to sort of achieve these over 100 laps, which is absolutely amazing. I remember when I was testing, I think we used to do about 60.
Yeah.
Maybe
for the week.
A push. Yeah, for a week. But it was completely different. I know reliability was always sometimes a bit of an issue. So it's just amazing the reliability that sort of comes our way.
So here's the question, right? Back in your day, when I was falling in love with Formula One.
Yes.
No. I mean that in
using nappies.
We didn't have such incredible bulletproof reliability. Are we at a point where we run these cars through their paces so much, there is so much telemetry, there is so much data, that we lose that element of jeopardy that any amazing result could suddenly spring from the ether on any given weekend?
Yes, where you do a particular little Frenchman, had a nickname, the Professor.
Ah, yes.
And why was it the Professor? Because he was very good at looking after the car. He was very good at feeling what the tyre was doing underneath him and reacting to that. It was a skill. Now that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
That's all been taken away. It's all down to sort of the engineers telling them on the radio what the tyre situation is.
Look after your front.
Look after your front, or your brakes, or whatever it may be.
Tyre temp this.
Yeah.
exactly.
And that takes away a little bit of what the skill set sometimes of a driver should be from that perspective. From the reliability, I don't think that's a big thing. Yes, it used to sort of create the rare sort of surprise podium position, maybe a race win.
Yes.
So every now and again, 1999, I remember.
Nürburgring.
Yeah.
How could you do that to Luca Badoer? You made him cry,
dear, very true,
Johnny.
Very true, very, very true. Yes. So, those days have gone. Now, to try and make it sort of interesting, we obviously need the fight with the different teams, and we need that from the Ferraris, the Mercedes and the Red Bulls, but we also need it from the others as well. They've got to have a chance of being able to maybe get in a podium every now and again, and sometimes, I know we've had it a little bit, like Sergio Perez getting his podium, Lance getting his podium a couple of years back as well, where they do happen, but they're very, very rare.
Yes, you need Red Bull teammates to take each other out.
Yes, to enable those guys to come in. Yes. My only issue I sort of have at the moment, and I'm not a fan of it, and I do hear a lot of people who aren't fans of it, I don't like second teams, a second Ferrari team or a third Ferrari team or a second Mercedes. I'm not a fan of teams being under the same umbrella as the main team, because there's always a horrible chance that a situation might come into play where they're going to aid and benefit from that relationship that they've got. I like the old school McLaren, Tyrrell, Stewart maybe when he was around, Surtees, all these teams that were involved. You know, when I started, there was 39 cars. There was a pre-qualifying. Yeah. But there were 39 cars at a given race weekend in 1889. And some of them were good. Some of them were shockingly bad.
I was wondering what you were going to say.
Yeah, some of them were shockingly.
Bring out the
they were shocking, unbelievable shocking. So, but there was this. The team rivalry, I think, is very important.
But the finances wouldn't allow that now. We couldn't have the small independent teams. Why not?
They're there now. Well, the Williams is what, 120? I always thought Force India before was spending about 80.
Yes, but that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
But they did a good job at 80. So why can't we make a
level
playing field?
That's what if you wanted pre-qualifying, and your budget to get a car even for pre-qualifying was 80 million, and if you didn't qualify for 300s,
you can't compete with 300.
No, that's true.
Can you? That's my thing. The differential is so large. Now, how do you control that? Police it is another problem, because obviously certain teams aren't going to agree to it. Which I totally understand. There's old Pierre there.
There is Pierre.
Which is good.
Now let's have a chat about Pierre. Yeah, we were lucky this morning on F1 TV to have Franz Tost and Graham Watson up in the commentary box, who obviously worked with Pierre last year at Toro Rosso.
Yeah.
Know him well, and obviously worked with Max Verstappen and know him well from his Toro Rosso days as well. And they are very much of the belief that Pierre is going to give Max a bit of a shock.
Well, let's hope so. Because I think it's good for us. It's good for him.
Yeah.
Pierre, for sure. It's maybe not so good for Max, but it's great for us, and that's where it sort of follows up. That's what we want.
Absolutely.
You know, we've got the Charles Leclerc, and it looks as if with Sebastian, he's going to give him a hard time. So that's great. In the rivalry within a team,
and you want that.
And we
need that, don't you? And for the teams to enable that to happen, to not favour one over another, but to give both a fair crack of the whip and say, have at it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want them to stop it.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen team orders sort of happen at the same time, and I'm not a fan of that. You know, there is, I suppose, the one that always sort of sticks in my mind was probably Abu Dhabi with Lewis and Nico, where Lewis was trying to play his game, but they came on the radio and said, well, don't play the game. And it was like, well, he should be able to play the game. The constructors was done, the driver was done. Why?
It was interesting because Toto said that was the biggest regret he's got in his career in Formula 1, is that he didn't allow Lewis and Nico to fight that day, and it made the team look bad.
Yeah.
And he said he constantly regrets that he did that he made the order for them not to fight. But then we roll into last year in Russia, and the team employed team orders.
Yeah, sure. But that's always going to be. The team will always come first.
Yeah.
That's where there's one team, their priority is to win the Drivers' Championship. No, the Drivers' Championship.
Well,
who is that?
Sorry.
There's one team. One team priority is to win the Drivers' Championship. And who is that? It's a dull red one.
Oh, the dull red one.
And that's history.
Yes.
Ferrari have always wanted the driver to be the gladiator to win.
Yeah.
They're a different dynamic because Ferrari's Ferrari and it goes with the driver anyway.
So do you think Ferrari mind which driver wins this year? Because obviously for the last few seasons it's Sebastian that's been favoured over Kimi.
I think at the moment they wouldn't care as long as they achieve it.
Exactly.
As long as they achieve it. And I think it's good for Sebastian. I know I had my difficulties when obviously I joined with Michael at Benetton, but it was more with Flavio than actually with Michael. The good thing with that, and I mentioned it earlier on, it's changed. Now I wonder again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier on, and it'd be interesting to see if he blasts past him or not. Now, is he just following to play and see what the car does?
I think a couple of things. I think there's no love lost between Carlos and Max, so I think Carlos is probably not making life easy for Max. But yes, I think you're right. I think Max is probably following that McLaren to see what the outwash is from the new front wings, to get that experience of following another car and to see what it does to his when he's following.
Didn't do very long there. I'd like to see what it done to turn 3.
Yeah, no, me too. See if he can actually follow around.
And I said I think Lewis did that the other day with Kvyat, and I think actually Vettel was doing that with Kvyat today.
Yeah, wouldn't
so it's a very important part of what Sunday will bring, especially around this track as well, where it's very, very generally very hard on the tyre as well.
Max running a new rear wing on that Red Bull today, so already a development part for the team, and an important one as well. So Max will have already had a day running the old spec, now running the new spec, seeing how that operates. Much bigger DRS this year, Johnny.
Yes,
of course.
And I hope it sort of doesn't make them sort of super blast past down the straight. So he didn't particularly do that there.
Nope.
So he sort of did it in a nice, comfortable way. So it wasn't sort of another 25 kilometres faster down the straight by doing it.
They are saying that once they re-engage the rear wing, that it feels like a parachute behind, because it's so much bigger that the instant deceleration is a real.
So the effect is still quite big then.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And as we saw yesterday with Daniel, when you lose that rear wing element.
Yeah. So I don't want it to come into play where it just it's irrelevant the straight.
Yes,
I don't want it to go that way. So it'd be interesting. I hope it doesn't do it. I did have a text from Damon Hill, and he sort of mentioned something where he noticed it didn't seem to. I don't know how he did. I'll have a look. It didn't make that much.
Isn't Damon skiing?
Of an effect.
Shouldn't he be having
no,
fun
I think he's
on
back
a ski
now.
slope?
No, I think he came back from that one. Where is it? We'll see who it is. No. So it was DRS on Seb's car.
Oh, right.
In a tow. Hardly made much difference.
Okay.
He spotted that earlier on.
Romain Grosjean back out on track. Haas had an ignition coil related issue, which was one of the reasons for their lack of track action today. They're going through a lot of small niggling issues this week, Haas. The drivers have reported the car feels, their optimism with the car feels fairly similar to last year, but certainly what we're hearing up and down the pit lane is that the midfield battle could be tighter than last year.
Yeah. Well, these niggly problems are something that's probably less nowadays than what it was in sort of the 90s for sure, maybe the early 2000s, but they've had a few of those over the years, haven't they?
Yeah.
Actually, they've had sort of a lot to deal with these little problems.
Well, they're still such a young team, aren't they?
Yeah, but then you sort of think, there's some experienced guys in there as well, so they shouldn't really get to that stage. We know how complicated, yes, we know how they are, but I think you would expect more from Haas probably at this stage.
Now, what's been interesting for me this week in testing is looking at how many of the cars are an evolution of last year's design. I think if we look at the Mercedes, the Ferrari, the Renault, the Haas, they're all very much an evolution, building on the solid blocks of the last few years. And it is so difficult in this sport, in this day and age, to find something different, to find something new, even with a regulation changes we've had this year with the rear wings and the front wings. And there is one team that's done something different, and that's Alfa Romeo with their front wing. And I was speaking to some of the folks down at the team earlier today, and they said, look, we knew what we'd done with our car. And when everyone else started launching their cars, we were looking at their front wings, and we look at Mercedes, and we're like, uh-oh. And then, you see everybody else, and they're launching, and there's the Haas, and then we see the red, no, they've all gone for, the normal design of the front wing. And then out comes Toro Rosso, and then out comes the Ferrari. And it's closer to what Alfa have done. But Alfa have gone the whole hog and just have those elements in the middle, the big gap then to the end plate. And if Alfa have found something, if they've found that Brawn-esque silver bullet with the double diffuser, this is not an easy thing to replicate, because the aero of the car starts on that front wing. Absolutely. And everything behind it follows from
follows
that.
Suit. Absolutely.
So it's not an easy thing to replicate. It's not an easy thing for another team to ape and put on their car straight like that.
No.
Are we potentially looking at Alfa Romeo, if they've got it right, not just looking at fighting for the top of the midfield, but potentially even, I'm not a betting man, but if I were, would I put a couple of quid on them for a sneaky podium in Australia? I mean, it's too early to tell, but they're one of those few teams that's had that ability, because of where they've come from, fighting for the back row of the grid just 2 seasons ago, to say, you know what, let's roll the dice and let's give it a go.
Yeah, but based on the time, you know, it's not a big chunk of change considering the difference. It's the soft versus the medium, isn't it? Am I
now
there's
some disagreement as to whether he was on the C4 or the C5 tyre, so whether he was on the softest or the softer. Okay. But it's still 0.6 of a second.
Sure.
But I don't think we're yet in quali sims, and it's not like, you know, we know that on their race pace runs, from what we believe their race pace runs to be, they're comparable with a Ferrari.
Yes, no, that's probably more telling.
Yeah.
It's, as I said earlier on, it's actually McLaren struggled more with the long runs.
Bingo. Yeah,
now
exactly.
that shows more.
So they're doing their glory run at the end of the day.
Yes, exactly.
But when you're looking at race runs, they're 1.5 to 2 seconds off.
Yes, exactly. So that is more telling than the end of the day, or the order we have at the present time.
Absolutely.
It's the long runs.
Yeah,
the long runs are always going to be the true ones. Ultimate pace, sometimes you might be more comfortable with lower fuel, maybe, on a particular car, but then you're talking of minuscule. You're not talking about seconds. And we were talking with McLaren, seconds, or 1 second.
Yeah.
So it's quite a big chunk of change from that point of view. But the race, we know Sunday, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
As well. So that may be where Kimi, Alfa might come into play a little bit more. But it looks as if they're going to be there or thereabouts. The only one, I suppose, that the question mark is still there is the Red Bull.
Yeah.
Exactly where are they?
Well, there's a lot of talk that the engine itself, the Honda engine, may be vibrating a lot, and because of the tightness of the package around the rear of the Red Bull, they can't yet crank it up as high as they want to. Now, that is, I stress, just a rumour, but we do understand that Honda have been able to change the architecture of the engine this year to make it more in line with what McLaren wanted in year one, which was that size 0 concept.
Yeah, okay.
Ironically.
I know, if that is
boy, can you imagine? It all comes good with what they wanted 4 years ago. And dear. Fernando watches on from the Indy 500 as as Red Bull Honda win the Monaco Grand Prix.
I hope it works. I hope they do get themselves in the mix.
I think we all, but you know, it's Honda. It was always going to come good at some point. They haven't just forgotten how to build an engine, particularly not a hybrid one. They rule the roost, you know.
Yes, in the old days they ruled the roost, but I think Europe has overtaken from the late 80s, maybe early 90s, but the late 80s especially. They were way ahead in the turbo era, original turbo era.
Yeah.
And now it's not quite the case. You know, you do what Mercedes have produced, and it is a trick piece of kit, real trick piece.
And that's the big question as well going into this year. What have Mercedes done in the engine department coming into this year, and particularly Renault, who are talking about big gains in the power unit department, both in terms of reliability and performance, which they desperately need.
Oh, crikey.
If they're going to keep their new boy happy.
Well, they need big gains just to get anywhere close.
Yeah.
To start with, so it's going to be interesting to see. From what we see at the moment, looks okay. Car doesn't look too bad. Change of direction is something that I think always seems to show if the car's good or not. Doesn't look bad. It's just going to be that power unit at the same time. So it's really down to the Red Bull, as I said before. But I don't believe they would have taken it for this season if they thought they were going to be worse off.
No,
it just would not have done that. Would they have waited for 2020? Well, I see the point. You may as well sort of just get on with it, get it in, do it, design the car around it, design the engine around the car at the same time, to then eventually get yourselves in a position where you can actually fight them.
Yeah.
And I think, personally, the engine to me didn't look bad last year. It wasn't bad last year. Remember, I think I said earlier on, I saw it pass a Sauber. It was only a Sauber, enough with a Ferrari in Mexico.
Yeah.
And it and it was able to power past. So it's not bad. That was the Toro Rosso.
Yeah,
so it
and
wasn't
I mean,
that
it's
bad.
the feedback that obviously Toro Rosso were giving to the head honchos at Red Bull about what was happening with that power unit, that the promises made were delivered on. And
Yes.
over the winter again this year, they've been given figures of we're expecting this much of an increase in performance, in horsepower, and every single promise that's been made has been delivered over the winter. So there's a huge level of confidence down there.
I think so. And you say about top speed. Some people say the top speed wasn't there. Now, top speed doesn't necessarily mean it's the engine. It can be a draggy car that can stop it from accelerating to a certain point. That's where the efficiency, I think, of like a Mercedes on the chassis side has the ability to push that car to a higher speed, just because I think the whole design concept works out. Now, Red Bull, we know, have always had high downforce, relatively a lot of drag, I suppose, historically. So it'd be fascinating to see exactly how it pans out. But on race pace, it wasn't bad at all.
Now, tell me, we're getting to this lovely part of the day. The sun's going down. It's part of the day the photographers always love, because you get those golden sort of sunshine across the track. Did you enjoy testing?
Yes.
Was it getting back, kind of first days of school, getting back into the swing of things, sort of dusting yourself down and getting back into it?
Yeah, well, I'm lucky I come from an era where we had loads of it.
Yeah, true.
So
never really stopped, did it?
It didn't really stop, no, exactly. There were sometimes where you did get a bit fed up, but that was only because things weren't... No, that was quite fun. That was quite interesting. That was always quite fun. Very fun. Actually, yes, that was very fun. Where was I going with this? So I remember doing a test. That was at Lotus. So it was the test after
early days, then.
The race of Portugal when I qualified 4th in Monza.
Okay.
Yeah. And...
is there a problem?
We went...
Seb, or is he just...
We went...
No, it's good. Sorry, go on.
That's okay. Went to Portugal, did the race, 2.5 seconds off the pace, absolutely nowhere, qualified 22nd or whatever the hell it was after qualifying in Monza 4th. So we then stayed on for the 4-day test and went through day 1, went through day 2, nothing was going anywhere, went through day 3, absolutely fed up. Nothing was changing. Went into day 4 and I just sort of said flippant, I said, well, let's just put Monza wings on, Portugal, which is sort of medium high downforce. Just put the Monza wings on, Estoril. Yeah. Let's just see what it does. Just what it does. I went 2 seconds faster. Because it was quicker down the straight, obviously, it was less weight, but it didn't go any slower around the corner.
You're kidding.
So that was frustrating.
Was that down to you being able to hold the car through the corner?
Yeah.
Just your driving style?
Yes, it was.
Of course
it was me holding onto it and hustling it around the corner. No, it was just it was an awful time where it was just the aerodynamics worked in Monza. Those wings worked with the drag, but obviously with the grip it got, suited Monza absolutely fine. The medium high downforce, as I said, we took to Estoril, didn't do anything. It was just drag. Pure drag. So as I said,
but you see now
so that was frustrating.
That all out in
no, they would have been before they even gone there. Yes,
exactly.
exactly.
Never taken those rings to Estoril in the first place.
Exactly.
This is what gets back to what we're talking about. Is there too much damn data?
Well, yes, there is, because I think that to me, I'm still one of these. I don't.
Purist.
I still don't like the radio communication. Do this and do that. And I know we went through all that stuff in Azerbaijan.
Yes.
With Nico and Lewis.
I mean, that was silly because that was there's a problem, but you've got to figure out what it is. Do you remember it? It was you had sort of reverse.
But then my thing,
it.
but then my thing is reverse engineer. We'll make it more simple then. Again, but of course, for the purest of the engineers within the team,
and it has always been an engineering and human endeavour.
But I want the human to actually be human when he's in the car and actually, like I said earlier on about the professor.
Yes, and
Alain
feel
Prost.
and.
Yeah, and if you're being told the tyre temperature, I knew when I'd spun up the tyre that the core was going to go hot.
Yeah.
Then I was going to lose grip. So then I knew, well, I can't do it for the next lap.
Yeah.
So I had to then ease it up. Then I'd have to build it up. So I had to sort of gauge where it was at, rather than someone telling me.
It was quite funny on the first day of testing here. The number of complaints from drivers over the drop in rear temperature on the tyre blankets, and we can't go out and push straight away. Diddums. It's going to take you an extra lap to get the tyres up to temperature. Deal with it.
Yes,
you're
exactly.
an F1 driver.
Exactly. That was the whole thing. Yeah, you know it.
Yeah, so did you.
So react.
Be better.
I know. It is fun.
Was it Patrick Head's line to, I believe it was Ralph Schumacher, whatever it is you do it better.
Yes, exactly. I know. But it's good in some way because it just shows what these beasts are all about.
Yeah,
even
totally.
these guys, as good as they are, they can still bite and they can still catch you out. So
and
it's good in one way.
But that's the thing, isn't it? You know, you need to see that human element that these things can still bite you. That when you aren't quite on it, you're nowhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and that is the thing that we get.
Kimmy's still top then, 117.7. It's about this time of day that we start to see a couple of little low fuel runs. It's about this time that the McLarens have been doing their glory runs at the end of the day. Where are they at the moment? There's Mr. Sainz, P8 119.3, so about 1.5 seconds off. George Russell is in the pits. Williams have done 5 laps today. 1 minute 49 on the board, but that's not really all that important. Today was always going to be about taking that car out and making sure that the thing didn't shake itself to pieces, really. You know, because it's pretty much the first time they will have put it together, and well, it is the first time they've run it. And so you just need to bring it in then, and it will be taken apart again and put back together again, ready for tomorrow, just to check that the wear on the part, that that nothing is coming apart, that every tube is connected, that everything is where it should be, so that come tomorrow they can have a proper first day of testing.
Yeah, well, I think they'll be fine. I know the crew, they're hard grafters, the boys and girls down there, so they will be working as much as they can to make sure, now they're here, that it will run as much as it possibly can. Historically, they've always been very good at that, reliability-wise as well.
Now, you must forgive me if I'm covering ground that you already followed with Alex. I was running around the pit lane doing Peters to camera earlier, so I didn't have the pleasure of listening in. But if I have covered these, then tell me to shut up and we'll move on to something else. Paddy Lowe.
Yeah.
As the man ultimately responsible for getting that car here for the start of testing, what lies in his immediate future?
Well, it's one of those things. We only briefly brought up sort of Williams, where we've had this before, where teams turn up late. I remember they flew in the car. Actually, I think they were here for the first day, but they flew it in that morning. I think, if I remember correctly, very, very late. And it's happened in the past. I remember when I was
this isn't the first time.
In Lotus and Benetton. I remember we had the same thing. But again, we didn't have a Barcelona test date fixed. We had a window where we knew it probably get done by that date. We can pop down at Silverstone and we can run it. So it's very different now.
When you've only got 8 days.
Yes,
that's
precisely.
That is it.
Precisely, and they're fixed in concrete, not flexibility or anything else.
So
the car being late, okay, it's frustrating, yes. The biggest thing, I suppose, now for Paddy, it's got to perform.
Yeah.
That's the reality.
I mean, if you're late and you're...
Yes, exactly, that's the thing. Exactly. If you're late and slow, big problem. Late and medium or good or whatever,
If
fine.
you're late and you pull a Brawn and you're 2 seconds quicker on heavy fuel,
well done.
You're golden.
Yes, yeah. But the situation we've sort of had for, especially last year, or the last 2 years, have been very frustrating to see them in the position they're in. And Paddy, I'm sure he does. He has to take responsibility for the situation they're in. He's a very knowledgeable, clever man coming from the multiple champions of Mercedes. You sort of think, well, he's going to bring massive knowledge, even if it makes you into 8th or 10th place. But to be where they have been is not a good sign. So for him, the pressure's on for him to deliver. And if he doesn't deliver, of course, it's a situation that they've got to look elsewhere, because you've given 2 years of hoping that it's actually going to make a difference. I like Paddy. Paddy's a good guy, and it's just frustrating to see at the moment himself and his team haven't been able to do it. But let's hope this year there is a slight turnaround and sets them on a positive direction.
Now, you have raced at a team defending a world championship. You know the pressures that are incumbent on that team. If you're Mercedes going into defending your 5th consecutive world championship, how hard is it to maintain that, not the drive to win, because the drive to win, I imagine, is constant, and regardless of what team you're in, where you are in the grid, that same drive to achieve remains the same, but the expectation to bring home the victories, to bring home the results. How tough is that to be a part of it?
Well, I think it's something that, I don't know, the mentality of motorsport people is to move things along as quickly as you can. I've never really met anybody that sort of just sits back and accepts where they are. They're always trying to sort of improve it in whatever shape or form that is. Now, Mercedes, as successful as they are, want to keep getting that success, because it goes into the record books. One, it's good for the brand.
Yes.
One, it's good for Toto, who's sort of, they're sort of running it with the old sort of nice piece of big rap sheet he can take to Mercedes at the end of the year and say, there you go, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yes.
So the motivation is always going to come from a certain direction, and I think Toto is highly motivated personally as a sort of an ex-racing driver. And he carries that through very well into the team. And I think the team react and have reacted in a very positive way. But the creation of it, obviously, was probably a little bit further back. Yeah. Obviously, with Ross and how Ross was able to get it into a very positive position. And they've just carried that on and actually fettled it very, very, very well. Smart, yes. Very smart.
Now, you used a really interesting word there, which was how they've reacted. And I think, personally, over the last 2 years, Ferrari have turned up with the better car and the team to beat. And ultimately, it's the way that Mercedes reacted to that, to outperform them on track, outthink them, outrace them, outdevelop them, crucially, that has handed them their last 2 Drivers' and Constructors' World Championships. If they have to do that for a 3rd consecutive year, do they have it in them? Or is that workload of not just having to fight for race wins, but to overcome somebody that's done in the first instance a better job than you? At what point does that toll become too much, and Ferrari do or are able to take advantage of the leg up, of the advantage that they have at the start of the season? Well,
when you have the two, and you put them sort of side by side, Mercedes, Ferrari, the strength is with Mercedes as a whole, as a whole year, as the relationship and the positivity and the ability to get the goods out of Lewis is why they're so strong at the moment. Lewis is driving next best. He's at a peak, I think. But they've been able to manipulate that in the positive way, allow him to do what he wants to do. Then he turns up on a Sunday and he does the job. And he does that very well. I was probably one of those, and Damon as well, a bit critical, flying around here, LA here, and New York there, and turning up in Barcelona a little bit late, blah, 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 blah. But you can't take away what he's still achieved anyway. So it works for him. Now, Mercedes have enabled that to happen. Then you go to the other side of the garages, and you've got Ferrari. And Ferrari have, like you said, they've come up with a good car. Personally, they've got a good driver in Sebastian. He has made his errors, but has he made the errors because the whole bubble of Ferrari and the pressures that are within Ferrari itself, the pressures that are in sort of the media and Italy itself, and the expectations, something that are placed on Sebastian's shoulders? Lewis doesn't have that. He's got none of that whatsoever. He's got what probably Michael had. He's got everyone believing he is the best. He's the best we've ever worked for. And I remember Ross always saying that was something with Michael. He was the best. So for them, they would do anything for him. But when you give and do anything for whoever that may be, you're always going to get a better human reaction, which then the human reaction becomes the speed that you see on the track. So Ferrari have got to get the whole dynamic. Maybe the change has come with the Riva Bene moving aside, and that's something that Sebastian has mentioned. So that's almost starting to be a sort of a positive flip.
Indeed.
And now it's really down to them together, and Charles as well, where they've got to be able to manipulate it to be better than they've ever done before, but better than Mercedes. And it started well. Now it's just keeping it. We know what the development can be in these things and how quick it is. Now Ferrari look as if they have the advantage. Got to keep it there. Not just rest on your laurels and think, right, we've got it. Australia will turn up. We'll do the job.
Well, if the last 2 years, exactly. If the last 2 years have shown Ferrari anything, it's that they can't rest on their laurels, because Mercedes, and in particular Lewis Hamilton, will be gunning for them. The man who is gunning for his 6th Formula One World Championship. Lewis Hamilton caught up with our Craig Slater earlier today.
Do you think it will provide for better racing? That was the intention with some of these rule changes.
I mean, I have no idea. I didn't know that was the reason for the rule change. I'm not sure that is particularly the case, but I've been behind one car, I think, out there, and it seemed fine. It didn't seem any different to last year in that respect. But I'm hopeful that it will be better for racing, for more close combat racing. But yeah, time will tell. Again, I've not really been out behind too many cars. So
I wanted to ask you about your teammates. I know Sebastian Vettel, your big rival, has got a young teammate coming in who maybe won't be the priority, even if he isn't sort of a defined number 2. But Valtteri must be really fired up this year to put together a proper title bid. How much of an extra challenge might you face for him?
For Valtteri?
Yeah.
I'm excited for Valtteri. I think it takes time to really dig your roots into a new team. It's not an easy process, and he's been an invaluable part of the team the last couple of years, and the growth has been, I think, has been amazing, and he's really helped keep us stabilized in terms of like positive energy within the team. So he'll continue on that form, but I'm sure he'll be, naturally reflects after each season. He will want to be stronger this year, and as a team collectively we'll support him in every way we can. And me and him have a very, very good working relationship, so we actually do talk about things with the car. We work together, which I don't know if I've ever experienced that in the past. We actually really do work together. We talk to each other about things. But that will continue, and we're hoping that we have a strong team, strong year together.
Fascinating to hear from Lewis about the dynamic between himself and his teammate Valtteri Bottas. And meanwhile, though, Danny Kvyat has sort of come to a halt at the start of the pit lane. Can't even blame being called into the FIA weighbridge, as there isn't one.
No, that's interesting, because I think it was Kvyat, that was the man he was following.
Indeed, yeah, you were saying that.
Yes, exactly. I think that was, so that was interesting. I knew there was something to it. Very clever, very smart thinking.
Indeed. Valtteri Bottas, how imperative is it for him to get a win on the board within, I would say, before we get back to Europe?
Very Esteban Ocon-ish, because that's what he's fighting against, probably. He was very unlucky last year, with China and Baku, for example.
He would have been leading the championship after Baku if he hadn't have had that puncture.
And
at that point, the whole narrative of
whole
2018
approach
changes.
Absolutely.
Everything.
But also the other way, because the pressure with Lewis is, well, I'm behind. I've got sort of battle in my hand. So for Valtteri, it's just got to be basically where he started off last season, but actually just have the luck go his way. But after he has the luck go his way and gets to Baku, leads the championship, it's then carrying on that form for the rest of that season.
Yes.
That's the biggest thing that we have to probably see. We could argue that as good as he was up until that point, it then disappeared for whatever reason. And sometimes that strength has to come through to show I've still got it, so and I'm still there, and I'm still
That's what I want to know. As a racing driver, so this is such a high-pressure sport, such a high-pressure situation that you know only too well. Can you create your own luck as a racing driver? Does confidence create luck? Does luck create confidence? Is it about a personal inner strength that you hold as a racing driver, that when you close your visor, to hell with the rest of the world and everything else, you can be in your own space and ultimately control your own destiny?
I think to a degree, yes. There is something, for whatever reason, sometimes you have times in a championship, when I'm probably more talking about when I did Formula 3, even Formula 3000, where you have this run, and I don't think it's luck. It just sort of materialises and happens. I don't think you create it, but it's somehow the aura of the Earth's power all come together, and it just sort of carries on with you. It follows you, in fact. Actually, it follows you because you've got the power.
Amazing.
You've got the control of it. So that's the only thing. Formula One for me, it didn't quite happen that way.
We'll pick this up in a minute. I've just been drawn my attention to the fact there is a slow-moving Sauber coming into the pit lane with no engine power. I don't think, doesn't sound like it anyway. Kimi Raikkonen rolling in. Rolling rawhide. And
that time of day, isn't it?
It is that time of day, yeah. Him and Danny Kvyat.
Yes.
So yeah, that's
low fuel run.
So that's fascinating. So on the topic that we were discussing, it never quite gelled for you in Formula One. If you're a Valtteri though, and that spiral starts to happen, and you start to get on that downward slant, ooh, a big slide for George Russell in the last chicane. So clearly he's starting to push the car a little bit as he goes for another tour. How do you, or how can you, pull yourself out of that spiral if it starts to pull you down? If all of the pressure that is on you, here's a replay of George coming in.
On the curb, sort of clip the inside, I think.
Yeah.
Just push the front on.
We saw something similar with Carlos Sainz earlier today. But how do you do it? How can you? And again, you know, we talk of the ability that you guys have to close the visor and carry on regardless. There must come a time at which it's impossible to close out those noises, to close out the doubts and the insecurities that you begin to feel outside the cockpit.
Yeah, the only experiences I sort of have was when I was at Lotus with Mika and Peter Collins, who was running it with Peter Wright. I always felt that they were sort of on my side. Now that gives you a lot of power because your boss is supporting you. And he was supporting us both, but I always felt he was supporting us both. Then when I went to sort of Benetton and Michael, Flavio never gave me that support.
Yeah.
So that spiral that you get, you can't stop because you're not getting any help from anywhere.
And
so you're all on your Todd.
Is that what we saw with Danny Kvyat?
Yeah,
potentially.
Yeah, partly his own fault because he thought everything was okay. Because I think every time he had an issue, everyone was sort of going, "It's okay, it's okay, it's okay." Yeah. You can only do so many okays, and then
it's going okay. I think right now, with France to kind of see what the others are doing. He has a keen eye for this kind of thing. We're just seeing kind of. There are a couple of places, obviously, I could have improved on from yesterday. So we're just seeing these corners and kind of seeing what to do for tomorrow. And yeah, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm half Thai, half British, it's cool. To be honest, I think it's a dream come true, really is, and to be with a Thai license, it means a lot as well.
So, just finally, what's caught your eye? Francis admiring the cars. Ferrari looks particularly good here. Is that the standout performer as far as you're concerned thus far?
Yeah, to be honest, I think on our side we're just more focusing on our job, not looking too much at the others, especially me as well, looking more at what I need to do rather than looking kind of at the overall performance. But as you said, I think Ferrari looked really strong. But again, you won't see until qualifying in Melbourne.
Great job yesterday, and have a good rest of testing and week 2 as well. Yeah, good guys, these two. And so many great drivers have come through the Toro Rosso programme, the likes of Sebastian Vettel, of course, Max Verstappen leading the way with the senior Red Bull team as well, and Alex Albon with that joint nationality. But I think we can claim him as a Brit.
Completely agreed. I think we can definitely claim Alex Albon to be a Brit, don't you?
Definitely. Well, Mum and Dad lived in England for many, many, many years, so yes, so definitely so. Lovely guy. Yeah, for a long, long time. His dad and Mum and
quick.
Well.
Yes. I mean, this is the thing. I was talking to Franz Tost this morning,
very much.
And he said, look, up until even beyond Spa, we weren't even considering him for the seats. We weren't considering him for the Toro Rosso place. He wasn't anywhere on our radar. But now he is. And we love him. Because he's fast. He is technically minded. His feedback is sensational. And this is a guy who, let's not forget, the likes of the George Russells and the Charles Leclercs and the Gaslys looked up to as the benchmark in karting. They looked up to Albon as almost like sort of back in the day, the Fernando Alonso's looked up to the Giorgio Pantanos as the benchmark of his day. The Nico Rosbergs looked up to the Giorgio Pantanos as this is the guy that's going to change the world, and then it didn't all come together. For Albon, for so many years, it looked like it wasn't going to come together. And then plucked from obscurity, he's here with the chance of a lifetime.
Yeah, and I think there's probably two things that stand out. One is that, strength, because he was on the Red Bull program, got dropped from that.
Yep.
Then had to deal with it and get himself back into to F2 like he did. And the second thing I think that was very positive as well, he was very consistent.
Yeah.
So consistent
Hugely.
through the year. And I think that was mighty impressive as well. And I think it's great to see him out there because you're right. He was a lost talent almost. So I think it's a good chance for him to show. And I think even with Kvyat, some people are saying, oh, well, Kvyat, he'll make a meal of it. But I don't think he will. I think this is where both of them will be able to flourish and blossom.
And the astonishing thing is that up until yesterday, both David Croft and myself had more laps in a Formula One car than Alex Albon. which is madness when you think. Complete and utter madness to come back. This time last year, well, not even this time, when we were here for the Spanish Grand Prix in Formula 2, Alex Albon didn't have a budget or a confirmed seat for the season.
Yeah.
And now he's here doing testing for Toro Rosso as their driver, about to make his Formula One debut. It's the most incredible turnaround story, and I couldn't be happier for him because he's a lovely lad. He's damn fast.
And he's earned it.
Absolutely.
He's absolutely earned it. And as I said, because of that mental strength that he had, that will take him a long way in this paddock.
Yeah.
Because that is something, as we've been discussing with Valtteri and everything else, it's something that is very, very tough, and the expectations are very, very high. His dad's a bit of a petrol head as well, so that's going to be something with Nigel, and of course Mum, I'm sure, will be popping along as well. And it's been a family that have been involved with cars for donkey's years.
So it's a touring car driver, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Kimi still leads the way, 117.762 now, a whopping 138 laps on the board. Sebastian Vettel 134, then it's Verstappen, P3, Hülkenberg P4, Kvyat, Grosjean, Fittipaldi's had an impressive day, I think. Great to see that name back on a Formula One timesheet. Christian Fittipaldi, a driver who was racing at the same time as you.
It was, doing that lovely 360 flip in Monza.
Oh,
you may remember.
landing on his gearbox.
Landing right back on, on the wheels. Yeah, on the gearbox, back on the wheels. Unbelievable. Good old Christian.
Sainz 8th, Ricciardo 9th, then Perez, Bottas, Hamilton, Russell. The bottom three, Russell's pulled it back up to a 125.6, so starting to push that Williams through its paces. I don't think we should be too worried about Bottas and Hamilton in the 1:20s with Raikkonen up on a 1:17.7. I'm going to say heavy fuel and not really worrying about things on the harder compound tyres, as is their want, as is their tradition, as is their now annual testing programme.
I think you're spot on with that one, yes. I think they
I
will not be able to get...
Once a year, I'm spotting. I've shot my bolt
in the
very early.
In the first few days. Yeah.
Oh.
But that's good, because there was a little tiny unknown. There's probably a lot of people back home thinking, fine, they'll be okay when they actually get round to it. I don't think it's going to be as simple as it was. I think Toto's already admitted that, and I think Ferrari and hopefully Red Bull will be more than willing to take away the race wins and championship from them.
Daniel Ricciardo has just set his fastest lap of the day, a 1:19.498. Interestingly, this morning, Nico Hülkenberg said a 1:18.8 at the time was just over a second off Raikkonen's session-topping time. He did so, though, without utilising the DRS because of the problem that Renault had with it. They weren't using their DRS on day one. They started to use it on day two, and then Daniel lost that upper element going down into turn one. So after that point, they welded it shut for this morning. Hülkenberg did not have DRS usage at all. You can just see there the aperture opening. Ricciardo does have DRS use, but he's still a fair chunk off Hülkenberg's time. Hülkenberg did set his lap, we believe, on the C4 tyre, so the softer, not softest. Daniel, it looks like he's out on a C1 or a C2.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. But it's difficult to get a read on Renault at the moment, I think, because they've had those problems with the DRS, because they're really, out of all the teams, they're the ones that are really mixing up their tyre usage between all of the 5 compounds. Very, very hard to get a read on where they're at on such a pivotal year for them, where they've got to deliver a good car. For Nico Hülkenberg, Cyril Abiteboul has said it's a make-or-break year for him. Yep. And for Daniel Ricciardo, who is used to and expects nothing but fighting for podiums and race wins. Yeah, well, it is something that we sort of expect Renault to be the Renault of old. So they're locking up going through that final chicane. There's a tricky little thing that is on the entrance, especially. It's something that expectations, they're always high with Renault, with the history that they've always been able to achieve good things, especially in sort of the first turbo sort of era, where they kicked it all off in 1976, I think it was, 76, 77. And of course then all the success they had with Williams and Damon and Nigel, for example, and of course then latterly with Sebastian at Red Bull as well. So it's something that we need to see from them. I think there's a lot of pressure on them as a manufacturer coming back into play like they have over the last couple of years, and it's especially for the team, it's something that they've got to make movements, because everybody else is. I think we've got Racing Point. I think they're going to be quite a decent sort You've got to remember not to call them Force India. I think I've done that about 12 times this week. I think I've
done Sauber for
yes.
Alpha as well. I've done that once, so it's going to catch us out for a little bit.
Absolutely.
But anyway, they've got to move up, because the other teams are starting to motor forward, and that middle gap that we had last year to the big three is going to be smaller.
Yeah.
So the fight is going to be even tougher.
Fantastic. Should we leave it on that, Johnny?
Shall we?
You've got to go and do some other bits and bobs. Go and discover the burning issues of the day.
I want to go and see a car. I haven't seen a car live yet.
We'll get down into the pit lane.
No, I will.
And also pop past the hospitality. I think they've got cream cakes out. So.
No, fat enough as it is. No more.
Never, my friend. Right, go on, get yourself off and go and see some cars. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate your insight. As always, mate, thank you so much. Tom Clarkson and Alex Sheikh are back. New commentators for our last hour here this afternoon. Hello, chaps. You need to turn your buttons on before I introduce you, don't you? See, this is we're having a producer.
Liquid television, Will.
Liquid television. Welcome back, my friends. Well,
nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, buddy boy. Max Verstappen still circulating at speed. 1:18.787 is his best lap of the day. That Red Bull still looking poised. Still looking.
You never said buddy to me when you came in. Is it like half-5?
What?
None of that. All these two walk in. Oh,
Well,
buddy.
that's because he did. All right, come here, mate. Come here, give me a squeeze.
Noted.
Love you. That Red Bull looks quite splendid out on track. Let's just change the subject.
It's a little bit like an old Tony Hancock sketch, that, when he gets dragged away from the microphone. That reference is purely for my father, who I think is watching at home. Yeah, Johnny's now leaving the booth, so we're down to just the three commentators. Red Bull looking terrific out there. Of course, big season for them with the Honda tie-up. But we were just speaking to Tom a second ago about how fantastic it is to see the cars at this time of day.
Yeah, Johnny and I were just talking about that. They look so glorious in the golden lights. The photographers absolutely adore this time of day. And you get those very famous shots, which I know Tom always used to like to choose for the magazines back in the day over at...
Do you know what, it is... I've actually just been out watching racing cars, and it's a beautiful day. 14 degrees, there's not a cloud in the sky, and the photographers...
Those beautiful shots where the circuit almost looked like it was fashioned out of gold, or you know, and the cars are just this shadow. Almost like a sort of a car. I don't know, like a car-shaped swan on a lake of gold. It's been a long day.
I was going to say, how many hours have you done today, Will?
Enough.
Borderline too many? Borderline?
Possibly.
I liked it. I like the analogy, personally.
Thanks, mate.
I also think it would be terrific to see Robert Kubica out on track tomorrow, purely for the fans at the end of the grandstand with that enormous banner that they've brought. And it's surrounded by many other tiny flags as well. It would be excellent to see him circulating for Williams tomorrow, because they've been cheering for him regardless, even though he's not been on track.
They have, and they were cheering for him all the way through last year's testing.
They were
as well, hoping to get a sight of him circulating in a Williams at some point. And when that didn't happen, actually Robert made sure that they could all get into the paddock and come and meet him, which was absolutely lovely. So it was, they're a great bunch of fans, and they've supported him, all the way through from when he was racing before, all the way through his convalescence after his big accident. Everything he's ever done, they've somehow managed to find out that he's been doing it. He's been at every test session, private and public, to show their support for him. I think that's just a measure of the man, a measure of who Robert is, what he means to his countrymen as well, and I think now to a far wider community, a source of incredible inspiration.
Completely agree with that, and magnificent shot of Verstappen coming down to turn 10, and all of the cars, of course, on a long run at this stage of the day. Thought it was pretty decent to see the times that Daniel Ricciardo was doing a few moments ago in the middle of that long run. Raikkonen with 138 laps to his name, Sebastian Vettel with 134, and we are bringing this third day. It has zipped by. It has absolutely flown by, and you get an idea when you have to describe almost every hour of it, the intensity that those down in the pit lane have to give, even at this time of year.
Couple of observations I made out on track. Well, actually, no, fun off. The funniest one is on my way to the comm box just now. I thought, I'll just nip up onto the roof of the pit garages and just have a look down, see what's going on. All of the teams had photographers up there. As the cars are being pushed back in, as the cars are being pushed back in, boom, nice overhead shot. It's quite funny. And then I went down to sort of turns 4, 5, 6.
Yep.
And funny that we've got the Red Bull on in shot at the moment. I really like the look of that. Just thought it was well balanced, and Max just looked very confident in it. I don't know what lap times he was doing, but it just looked very nice out on track. Also, the other thing, at the end of the straight, these things really do stop on a sixpence, and when you haven't seen them for a few months, just, yes, what is it? They now gone up in weight, 740 kilos now, something like that. And still just unbelievable how quickly they stop.
Seeing a Formula One car in the flesh never ceases to be a thing of absolute awe-inspiring beauty and wonder. They're just so superb. I can still remember the first time I saw one for real. I think Johnny might have even been driving it, actually, back in the day. I probably wouldn't have said it with him sitting here. He'd be very angry.
You've already fallen out once.
Well, I did offer him a cream cake. But, they just, whatever era it's been, to see one in the flesh, it remains just a tremendous inspiration. They're just phenomenal creations.
Just to see one stationary in the pit, phenomenal. Not just what they do on track. Yeah, I agree. They're just... Even with the halo, completely used to that.
I'm completely used to it now. Completely used to it. Have you seen the IndyCar thing that they've done this year? So they've not gone for aero screen or for a halo. They have gone for I think it's a titanium sort of block that sits on top of the tub and is supposed to deflect away anything that comes in. I think the FIA had tested something like that, but it was I think it was 5 mini strafes that came up the nose and were supposed to deflect something away. But that's something IndyCar are testing. So I don't know how beneficial it would be. They did test the aero screen, actually. I think they tested it at Phoenix, maybe. Scott Dixon reported that it was actually not too bad, even with the lights and being on an oval and all of those kind of things. But we have halo for the time being in Formula One, and as Tom said, I don't really think it's quite as bad as it was on first impression.
It's a similar thing to Vettel saying earlier in the week that he didn't like the look of the front wings. There was a question after the photos of the cars at the launches whether they would look out of proportion to what we're used to, but I think they work.
But it all happened so quick. I mean, do you remember when we had those lovely cars in 2005, 2006, and we started to get the chimneys on the side pods and the flicks and the winglets everywhere, and then in 07 and 08 it just went mad. Completely mad. And I loved those 08 cars. They were just insane. And then we got into 09 and they're all gone.
Yep.
And you had the very low, very wide front wing and the really narrow, really high rear wing. And everyone said, they look stupid. That doesn't look like a Formula One car. That's absolutely ridiculous. And within a couple of races, everyone was like, you showed them a 2008 car. Ooh, what is that monstrosity? Look at all those flicks and wings and appendage. Oh, it looks dreadful. I do think you just get used to them very quickly. I do still think these cars are a bit too long and a bit too heavy.
Yeah, I had a few questions about that earlier on. You'd like them a little bit nimbler.
Absolutely. You know, look, we were talking about it earlier today. There is still few things on earth more impressive than watching a Formula One car at full tilt through the swimming pool.
Yeah.
At Monaco. Particularly if you are standing on the exit of swimming pool next to the cameraman and that car is gunning for your face. It is
nose on the fence. It's an incredible experience.
Terrifying. But when those cars were that much shorter, that much narrower, that much nimbler, I don't know. They just feel a little heavy these days. They look a little bulky. For my eyes. And it's it's different for everybody. What do you think, TC?
I agree with everything you're saying. I think they can look a bit lazy. But I mean, it's just as we look at George Russell just putting the mileage on the FW42, I'm not convinced that's behaving particularly well.
No, he's had a few moments, hasn't he? This afternoon.
Well, I mean, it is only his 13th lap in it.
Agreed, but I think if you wind back the clock to the first 13 laps of anything else we've seen so far this test, I'm not convinced that...
But we didn't see their shakedowns.
That's true.
You know, Mercedes,
That's a very good point.
It could have been obviously edited beautifully for film, but the shakedown, / filming day, could have been hideous, and we don't know.
Just grabbing a brake and just... Yeah.
I think the sculpting of the side pods is fascinating. The way that it comes down, we were describing it earlier as like a slinky pair of hips. As you see, it slopes down and sort of tucks in midway back. That's quite interesting and certainly unique from a design perspective. There you go, a lock up alternate. Yeah, he's certainly nowhere near happy with it. Nowhere near. Not long to go now. 50 minutes left on the clock. Kimi Räikkönen's time from this morning, 1:17.762 till easy for me to say, still the time to beat. Will we see a glory run at the end of the day about this time from McLaren, as we have done? Danny Kvyat is about to, well, he's trying to set a decent lap time, his best for the day. He's just gone green in Sector 1 on a 29.9, which puts him comparable with Räikkönen, 21.9 also for the first sector. Oh, and then he's put in a second sector that's 11 seconds off the pace. So that's that one done.
Right on cue. Good to see George Russell finally getting some lap time. Must have been difficult for him to have to watch. Similar thing for Robert Kubica.
Very much.
Similar thing for the entire team, as we have covered at various points of this week. But he said it felt a little bit surreal to be out there, very much echoing the sentiments of Alexander Albon day before. So big day for George Russell, and we can maybe hear a little bit more about that from Natalie down in the pit lane.
As you will have noticed in the last few days in testing, cameras are absolutely not allowed in the garages, are they, Bob? No, we've had to put the camera down every time we've wanted to come back through to the paddock. So we're going to come to a few places that we don't normally. And this is the media pen outside the back of Racing Point. This is where the drivers stand, and I'm normally on the other side interviewing them. And if you look behind me, you'll see a whole number of new sponsors. Williams' loss has been Racing Point's gain because Lawrence Stroll has brought a number of backers with him, and what a difference that has made to the team. The morale has massively been boosted. And if you think just around 6 months ago it looked like the team were going into administration, they now genuinely feel they are in with a fight, and they can bring that fight even to the top three. They're looking, Sergio Perez told us last night, to really fight for fourth this season. So new owner, new team, very exciting times at Racing Point.
It is exciting times at Racing Point. I'm looking forward to seeing what that design team can do. Let off the hook. Unleashed.
Yeah, I am too, and the team has been very honest about the fact that this isn't the final version of their car. They will have a substantial upgrade package on it by the time we get to Melbourne. And, you know, we've spoken about Williams and the struggles that they've had this week. Let's not forget, Force India have brought an old car to testing for the last couple of years for the first week. So it's not all doom and gloom down at Williams, and indeed it's much better than doom and gloom at Racing Point, who for the first time in a while have a car that ostensibly will be its 2019 car, with a massive upgrade package booked in for when we get to Australia. But yeah, really good spirit, really good feeling down at the team. I think after the struggles that they've been through over the last year, to know that they are in a financially secure place, that Lawrence Stroll and the investment team that have salvaged the company are already making moves to build a larger factory, a larger base. You know, this is the start of something, I think, very significant for them.
Let's hope so. Let's hope that they can take the fight forward. It would be so good to see the midfield take the fight to the big three, to Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull, as George Russell continues on his way. Tom, you were saying that maybe there are a few doubts about Williams not only being here, but the performance of that car from the team. Is there a specific area that they're maybe concerned about? Maybe just not... At certain points doesn't look as developed in terms of, or maybe not as aggressive as some other cars on the grid.
Well, when you speak to some of the sort of technical analysts who are here in Barcelona, they will say that perhaps the front wing is looking a little bit simplistic. But I mean, it's just hearsay in the paddock, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think people are putting two and two together and making five, saying, you know, the car's late, so there must be problems all the way down the line. But what is a little bit frustrating about them arriving late here is there wasn't one particular part that was delaying it, and it's as if Paddy Lowe, the technical director, he he hasn't been that specific, I don't think, with the senior management of the team as to what has delayed the whole project. If you knew that it was just an issue with one particular element of it that was slow in production, then it's a sort of lot easier to get your head around than if it's just, no, it's all late.
Because there were rumours there was something to do with the brakes, wasn't it? And that proved not to be true.
Reason why it was late?
Yeah.
I mean, again, the people I've spoken to they said they genuinely, there was nothing, not one particular reason. It was as if someone had forgotten to tell the relevant person that testing was a week earlier this year. You know, nothing specifically the problem. But anyway, it's great to see them out, although he's not actually going much quicker at the minute, Russell, is he? He seems to sort of, good sector one, and then it sort of slips away over the rest of the lap. But anyway, so Romain Grosjean back out on track. Let's do a bit of livery chat. What do people think about the black and gold?
The gold's not right.
The wrong...
It needs to be more... We spoke about this already. The gold as gold, great concept, but it doesn't work. You need a kind of almost a creamy bronze if it's going to work.
It doesn't stand out, particularly in this light. From
with the golden sunlight coming down, you can barely sort of make it out. It's something that Lotus learnt quite quickly with their car. So
they
changed
it through the year, didn't they?
The Haas pings very much because you've got that bold silver on the black, but if you want the gold to ping, I think they're going to have to dial it back a little bit.
I guess, is it the same colour as the actual can?
I've never seen a can.
I've never seen a can either. They must have some down there. Well,
if you say so.
You would expect so, given what we normally see from other drinks manufacturers that are involved heavily in this sport.
Indeed.
I've towed the line there, Will. It's okay. No brands mentioned. Tom, is there a livery that you think is better than the black and gold? What do we make of the liveries for 2019?
What do you want to see? I've really enjoyed seeing that the Ferrari.
Yeah, looks good.
I maintain that I think Enzo is turning in his grave, but it does look quite good, doesn't it? Very distinctive.
It's a bit orangey.
I think that's the issue that Enzo might have with it.
Yeah, but of course the team had a lot of success with an orangey red in the 2000s, so not the worst thing in the world. It's in the flesh when you see it up close. The matte red is lovely. And I've always liked the matte navy of the Red Bull with the slightly glossy decals on it. So for the Ferrari, and I like the black against the red as well. I think that looks pretty mega. We were talking earlier that we'd like to see either gold or black rims.
Yeah, take it back there.
Would be very cool, just to finish it off nicely.
I quite like this. I think the Williams looks good. I quite like the Williams in light blue.
Oh, it's much better in the flesh than it was on photos.
Yeah, the launch photos were a tad worrying, but that does look good on track. Almost 90s Benetton vibes there, the side of the car.
Oh, you mean late 90s?
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than
the early yellow and green ones.
Yeah.
But we're just before the Renault carried a similar colour as well. When a grandstand around this racetrack, when Fernando Alonso was in those colours, just complete sea of blue.
Yes.
In years gone by.
Well, of course, the flag of Oviedo is
same colour.
Is light blue. Actually, that's the one time in recent times, anyway, that Ferrari have created merchandise in anything other than red. Was for the Spanish Grand Prix when they made light blue Ferrari T-shirts, which had the cross of Oviedo on the back, and on the front you had the Scudetto. For the team.
And just to clear up the rest of the liveries, Red Bull staying with a version that they've had. They've got so many good testing liveries and then they never race them, which is somewhat a shame. And Will, you've been mentioning earlier in the week about your desire to see a throwback weekend where everyone runs a bit of a retro livery.
I have indeed. I would absolutely love to see that. But for now, Natalie is down in the paddock with the first Italian driver he will be, to start a Grand Prix in some, is it 8 or 9 years since Jarno Trulli and Antonio Liuzzi. It is Mr. Antonio Giovinazzi.
Great to see you. Big smile on your face, and so it should be, because you guys are looking good. Listen, I know I'm not going to get too carried away with testing, but Kimi's the only one into the 117s. You got, 93 laps in yesterday. Things are looking pretty rosy.
Looking good. I think a first impression from the car is positive from my side and also from Kimi's side. So yeah, I think we are doing a good job. We need to keep working like that. Still a lot of days of tests, and we need to try to improve the car and make sure we have a good and positive car in Melbourne.
And now, last year, in terms of improvement and development, Sauber did incredibly well, particularly in the early stages. Do you feel that same confidence that you're going to keep taking these steps forwards when you need to?
Yeah, they did a fantastic job. I think last year, fighting for the last position at the beginning of the year, and then fighting for top 10 in the end of the season, so it was a good improvement. I hope we can start the season already there on the top 10, and then try to stay there. This is our target. But for now, I think it's too early. We don't know what is the real potential of the car, also from the other competitors. So we need to wait a little bit. But I'm sure that the car have a good baseline and need to work and improve a little bit more.
Actually, when you look at a number of the teams, there's a lot of optimism in the paddock about the performance and reliability of a lot of these cars. Do you see it as being a massive fight then? Maybe Mercedes, Ferrari, possibly Red Bull are out of touch, but beyond that, it's very hard to tell, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it will be a really hard season. We look all really close, to be honest. Details will make a difference, and this is what we need to find here in Barcelona. And then, it's a long season, 21 races, and we need to focus in every race, and then we'll see what is our result.
And you personally, how excited are you about being with this team?
A lot. I waited for too long, 2 years. I was the third driver of Ferrari, but now finally I will have my opportunity here on the full season. And the team, also the people on the team, they have a lot of motivation. This is something really good to see. So I think we can do a good result.
And teammate Kimi, how have you found him so far?
I think I have a really good teammate, a really strong teammate. But from the other side, I think Kimi can be a really good teacher for me, but also a good reference about the result. But I think the main thing is to work together, work really good together, and make the best result for the team.
Fantastic to see you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
There's a really good vibe going on. It stems from Fred Vasseur at the head of the team. It goes and extends all the way through Antonio and through Kimi, through the time that they've run. I've just had a question on Twitter which says, why did I refer to McLaren's headline times as a glory run but not as Alfa Romeo's as a glory run? And the reason for that is that Alfa Romeo's times on their long run pace back up their headline times on softer tyres, low fuel pace, whereas McLaren's at the moment, from what we understand of the situation, unfortunately, and as much as we would love to be able to say the opposite, do not. Alfa look to have a tidy car both on a long run and a short run.
Yeah, I think the expectation was that Alfa, certainly from the aggressive design that we saw at the start, the expectation was with that increased funding, with someone like Fred Vasseur at the top of the team, with the facilities that they've got there, with some people who have come from the Audi operation, from the former entry there in the World Endurance Championship, they are going to be able to take a step forward. And as you say, the times have backed that up. So the expectation has been met with the reality at this stage. McLaren, it is very early indeed. McLaren. We were speaking to Sam about the design of the car at the very on day
Sam
one.
Collins from Car Engineering,
and he was lauding the changes, but Lando Norris being open and honest and saying the car still has flaws, still has
flaws,
things to be worked on.
But he said it's vastly different to last year's car, and aerodynamically feels like a big step forward for McLaren, which is huge news for them and good news for them because it's what they needed, having made the bold claim that they had the best chassis in Formula 1 and was simply being let down by the Honda engine, which then went and raced to fourth in Bahrain, whatever it was. And they still struggled with their car last year with an engine in the back that was winning Grand Prix. So the changes needed to be rung, have been rung. Young, fresh voices and ideas are coming through at McLaren. as they await the arrival of James Key, who could be the key to unlock the potential at the team. It's I think really exciting times at McLaren, and just the start. We were asking questions about George Russell and Williams and the car. I've just seen a report that Williams have admitted that sadly not all of the parts are here to allow them to begin the aerodynamic development and testing that they need on the car. So what they have out there at the moment is, unfortunately, a very rudimentary version of their car.
I think there are going to be more parts arriving tonight.
Absolutely, but just in terms of what
we're seeing today
at the moment.
Yes.
There is Lewis Hamilton. Is it Lewis or is it Valtteri at the moment? It's Lewis, isn't it? It is Lewis.
They've been swapping
the clues with the number and the helmet. It's funny. They're one of only a few teams that are actually swapping drivers halfway through the day. Renault doing the same, and Haas also giving their reserve driver Pietro Fittipaldi a run out as well. It's going to take me a while to look down and see Sainz and remember that he's not at Renault and that Ricciardo's not at Red Bull, and seeing Raikkonen and Vettel together and thinking, did they split the shift today? Even in they've both done 130. Oh yeah, they're not teammates anymore, are they? It's going to take a while.
10 changes to this year's grid. Biggest shake-up in a long time. You've got a generational shift with 3 drivers coming up from Formula 2. Big moment for Lewis Hamilton.
No, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say if they've got photographers up at turn 9, this is a great time of day to get a rear shot, because as we saw him coming through there, the diffuser was beautifully lit. You could see all the detail on that. If we get a replay of it, a slowed down replay of that coming through, there you go. You see again, you've got all of the detailing when the sunlight at this time of day is on the rear there. I'm not sure if he hasn't got any. So he's got Flovers on it that's making it lighter. Here we go. Here's a replay. Look at the back of the car as it goes through. And there you go. Look at that. If you've got a photographer there, all the detailing on the diffuser right there. That's going to be a great shot for whoever's out there at the moment.
Mad dash of photographers.
quick, run! We shouldn't be on the roof after all.
Yeah, exactly. We've done the aerial shot, now we do the rear shot.
Excellent. Really, really good. Really, really good. We were talking, before we threw down to Natalie, with Antonio, about the concept of potentially Formula One having a throwback race, as NASCAR does.
Yes.
And the idea for that. Each team does a retro livery. Do we think that's a good idea, yes or no?
Absolutely, yes. I think it was excellent when Renault did it for their anniversary of
just with their shirts,
just with the shirts, and it's just something different. It's something that I think fans would buy into. I think when you look at an event like the Goodwood Revival and the scenes you see there,
totally.
It's a wonderful thing, and I think it would mark out maybe a race as Lewis goes deep at turn number 10 and gathers it all together. I think it would be something that it would make a real spectacle of one specific race.
Agreed. Here we go, down into the brake. They've still got that oscillation on the rear wing. I'm not sure if taking away the T-wing at the back of the Mercedes has added to that oscillation on the rear wing, but we see it at speed on the straights. So between turns 9 and 10 and down the start-finish straight, the rear wing on that Mercedes is oscillating quite distinctly left and right. Let's take a look at Lewis now. There you go, as he comes under braking. Real oscillation. TC, retro, throwback race.
Well, we all love a good retro helmet, don't we?
Do you
remember when Kimi turned up with James Hunt's helmet?
Yes.
Did Jean-Eric Verne have
He had a Sever, and Ericsson had a Ronnie Peterson lids. Yeah,
so
very cool.
Love a bit of retro. But I think that says a lot about how little today's helmet liveries actually mean to us.
Yeah.
Because I am still harking back to the wonderful, distinctive liveries that never changed. Do you remember? I think Vettel started the ride, actually. There was a time when Vettel turned up with a different helmet design every week.
And sometimes every day. Yeah, as well. No, I agree with you. And I don't know if kids still... Do kids still have school books, or does everything done on a computer? But I used to spend all my time in lessons doodling my favourite drivers' lids. Senna, Damon Hill, Senna, but you sit there and you would draw as Lewis takes the long route round this time. I would doodle lids. I would design, if I ever became a racing driver, what helmet would I design? And you'd spend ages. How many of today's drivers' helmets would you, if you had a blank piece of paper in front of you right now, how many of them could you draw?
Good question. Well, very few of these testing ones, because Dan Ricciardo...
Certainly not Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah. Lewis, I think you could probably do.
You probably do half the grid.
Yeah.
I mean, Vettel's is easy.
But completing the grid, yes.
But that's the thing. And you couldn't... I mean, sideways, Vettel's helmet's easy, because you just draw a helmet, blank, there you go, done. Because from the side it's blank. They're so overly complex and complicated, and any kid coming through karting into single-seaters, if you're designing your helmet, go with something simple and stick with it. Keep it. It's the start of every season. The drivers get on Twitter, hey, what would you like to see from my helmet this year?
Yeah.
I'd like to see you stick with
the
what
same
you had,
one.
actually, because you had a great design. Don't mess it up. George Russell asking everybody this year, and his lid's is lovely, but where's the individuality? Where's the reflection of who
Mark
you
Webber
are?
was always big into that, believing that it was part of his identity.
Yeah.
Anthony Davidson, that mega sort of the Chiva
design
on the side. Those great Dario Franchitti, those great designs that you knew as soon as you saw it. That's who it is. When you think back, Coulthard, Hakkinen. Prost, Senna, those helmets, immediate, visceral, simple, and okay, it doesn't matter anymore because there's a halo there and you can't really see it. But I don't know, there's something. Are we too old school in that regard, or is there just something quite nice about it?
No, I don't think we are. I think we can't see their faces.
Yeah, so give us an element of who you are.
Yes, you can't change your face every day, can you? So it'd be nice if they didn't keep changing their helmets. That would be my take on it. But.
Would you guys like to see the halo in the helmet colours?
Yes. Yeah, something like that. I would like to see that.
Because we have lost a bit. We were talking about adjusting immediately to the halo, but we have lost a little bit of vision of the driver's crash helmet, as you see now with Max.
It's interesting because the darker halo, is an effort to almost make it disappear. Mercedes have gone for a silver halo this year to try and incorporate that into the design and the livery of their car. I think either go completely the other direction and make it very clear that it's like their helmet, such as Lando Norris did in Formula 2 last year. The neon yellow and blue, and it was very distinctive and very cool. Or utilise the space on the fin that now has, a little bit of a logo on it and the number, and put a national flag on it, as we've seen from, is it Tim Holmes on Twitter, who's done that with his car designs, beautiful renders of imaginary car designs. He did a great one for Red Bull that was, had the white of Honda with the Red Bull logo on it, and then a Dutch flag on the fin and a French flag on the fin. It looked very, very cool. And you just think, that would work. It would really work. Why not give it a stab? Why not indeed? I don't have an answer for that. Wish I did.
25 minutes to go until the end of the day, and the review show that follows with Rachel and the rest of the gang, reviewing what sort of day it has been. And it has been a day where we saw Fittipaldi stop for Haas earlier on. We saw a spin for Carlos Sainz in the McLaren. Grosjean then stopped very early on in the afternoon session, as we look at Lewis Hamilton in the pits. And the main headline from the day, I guess you'd have to say, is that Williams finally taking to the circuit, but without the full complement of parts they would require.
At least they're on track.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a 2019 car, and the fact, round of applause from the whole pit lane, media, other teams, from the fans in the grandstands, just reflects the respect, the admiration, because everybody knows that if they could have been here on day one, they would have been. And they have been working their tails off back at Grove and here to get this thing on track. It's not for want of trying. And just a huge effort, mammoth effort to get it here, get it done, which was reflected and respected by everyone in this pit lane, reflecting that, there is when the lights go out, they're at war. But until that point, and after that point, there is a tremendous feeling of community here, which we saw with Lotus when they had their financial problems and they turned up at the races and were locked out of their hospitality units, and the other teams were buying them pizza. And when when Super Aguri got points and weren't expecting to, and they didn't even have any champagne, and so they were brought champagne from the other. So same with Lotus when they got onto the podium in Spa. I remember in that year when they had all those financial problems, and people on social media were saying, "Oh, well, they can afford champagne, can't they?" Actually, no, they couldn't, and that was brought to them by the other teams. Yeah. Because everyone was so made up for them. You know, there is that wonderful spirit of community and family that exists within this sport. And that when people do well, despite the odds and, you know, against all odds, everybody respects it and loves it because they've all been in that position. They've all done the hours and put it in and come back from the brink. And talking about pulling it back from the brink, Danny Kvyat, 118.2. Possibly a little glory run at the end of the day, but it puts him second quickest behind Kimi Räikkönen.
It's great to see someone going for a lap time at this time.
Yes, it is.
I want to see
Ricciardo's doing the same thing as well. Personal best in both sectors.
I bet they've got a whole load of hypersofts left over from last year that they don't need, right? Give them free fuel for the last 15 minutes, as many sets of hypersofts as they want. Get at it. Just have some fun. I mean, they wouldn't do it, would they? They're not going to show their hand. Ricciardo's on a personal best lap. At the moment, setting the sectors green and goes
to second.
P2, 118 point. Yeah, we've got the glory runs now. This is what we want.
Great end to the day.
Yes,
great end to the day. So Kimi Räikkönen setting his time on the softest tyre earlier on. That was a 1:17.7, and now we've got Ricciardo just into second place with a 1:18.1. Kvyat with a 1:18.2. And it'd be great to see a bit of attacking driving to finish off this third day in the afternoon session, and Ricciardo pushing that Renault for the first time.
It was a great lap from Kimi earlier. I bumped into Ruth Buscombe from Alfa Romeo, very nearly said Sauber, over the lunch break, and I said, "Hey, you know, how's it going? How are you?" And she just looked at me and she went, "Purple." Okay, nice, very nice. As I said, there's a really good feeling of confidence down there. The whole team's feeling good.
Picture it, frame it, there it is. How many times will we see Kimi at the top of the times? But yeah, it's good to see Renault up there.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I feel has been a consistent message from the drivers, all of the Renault-powered drivers so far, is when you ask them, yeah, what do you feel about the progress Renault have made over the winter? They've been a little bit wishy-washy in their